Help! Save me! A heart-rending scream rang out, breaking the usual silence. He's coming. Screams continued to be heard on board the spacecraft, floating smoothly in space. We're all going to die. What's the deal? Close the door quickly. Stay away. One of the hatches of the ship was covered with cracks, bloody prints and smudges. Only dark silhouettes rested on the surface, leaving traces and twisting before disappearing into the depths of the ship. To help. There was another scream from one of the silhouettes. Ka. There was a cough, and palms covered with scarlet blood began to slide along the surface of one of the windows and leave streaks with prints. Ka. Ka. At least someone help me. The victims of a non-existent savior begged. The dark gray bubbling substance seemed to be spreading along the perimeter of the ship, with the tentacles of a sea monster becoming covered with large bubbles. Clusters of large bubbles secreted mucus, which fell in large drops to the floor. Vibrations echoed through the corridors of the shrouded something, and now and then brewing bubbles burst, releasing a black liquid. Another bubble released the liquid again, forming a hole in its surface. But the bubble was not allowed to exist anymore, and someone stepped on it with gusto, trampling the bubble into a dense muck. The muddy surface of the helmet screen immediately reflected the widespread streams of substance covering the walls and ceiling of the corridor. Report to all units on board. An order rang out in the speaker. We're going to the captain's cabin. A group of people with machine guns overweight followed in an even formation from the door deep into the ship. I repeat. All divisions. The commander's voice was heard again from a small screen located on the sleeve of the suit. A small screen of a light blue shade with dancing lines seemed to have descended from an ECG report. This is the captain. One of the fighters spoke. Should we go too? Asked his ally, following on his heels. You must ignore these instructions if you want to save others. One of the fighters spoke. We are moving forward according to the schedule. We have to save as many human lives as possible. Exclaimed the fighter, on whose back the numbers 01 were printed. This is an order. He commanded. Yes, that's right. There were shouts of agreement on the squad. Making his way through the shattered corridor with bloody splashes on the walls, the fighter stopped, listening to some indistinct sounds somewhere in the distance. There. Is anyone there? Fighter 01 heard the question, carefully moving further step by step. Help. I beg. There was a plaintive call, and the group of people in suits continued to move further and further. Ka. The fighter slowly advanced, but soon leaned against a wall and decided to look from the shelter to where the voice was coming from. What? For? The stunned soldier exclaimed as his eyes widened in shock. A terrible picture appeared before him. In a room also dotted with gray tentacles, on which bubbles, in the middle lay two large mountains of corpses piled on top of each other, and their faces were distorted by the emotion of horror. How so? One of the fighters muttered, amazed at the picture he saw. Hey. Keep yourself in hand. I decided to support his ally right there, so that the team would not lose morale. We do not lose vigilance. Fighter 01 spoke while his allies scattered a little to assess the terrain. Quickly look for survivors. There. Is anyone there? The voice that the team commander was looking for rang out again, to which he immediately turned around. Get me out. From here. The voice came from under someone's corpse. You won't even notice it right away. Be patient a little. The fighter exclaimed and immediately rushed to help. We are now. But what was his surprise as soon as he saw the victim of the incident? He paused, eyes white and not daring to blink. To me. It really hurts. Help. Someone lifted the corpses, and a huge head looked out more like a stranger. Two glowing eyes, two rows of sharp teeth, with purple drops of mucus dripping from them. Monster. Stuttering, one of the soldiers of the squad shouted, which immediately surprised the others. But the man did not have time to say anything more when suddenly a clawed paw with 4 fingers grabbed his head like a toy and pulled him towards himself. The other two who were standing nearby were immediately taken aback when they saw the monster that got out. Ka. Ka. Only the captured fighter issued them. In front of them, a monster was sitting on a mountain of bodies, holding their partner with a distended belly. The monster is a dark gray shade, with 3 pairs of clawed hands, 2 long like a spider, and 1 pair of small ones, as if he is to some extent a descendant of a Tyrannosaurus rex, with a long ribbed tail at the end of which there was either a claw or a sting. His head was also a match for the body, rather big, with an elongation on the head like a squid triangle. Predator. Small white eyes with a black narrow elongated pupil. 2 rows of sharp teeth, like a piranha, covered with brown blood. The enemy is on the horizon. Fire! Exclamations of fighters were heard, and laser discharges of bright green color immediately flew from their weapons. But it was not there. The monster was much quicker and masterfully dodged the barrage of fire. The monster, like lightning, quickly slipped between the shots and was getting closer to them every second. He scratched his skin to the brush, which formed 4 scratches of a bright green color. One wave of the paw, and now a green liquid in an amount of considerable size, flew out of the scratches towards the soldiers. The soldiers did not have time to react, they were only surprised by what suddenly began to fly in their direction. Acidic blood. One of the soldiers exclaimed. The monster's blood was indeed like acid. The green goo got on the hand of one of the fighters and immediately began to burn through his suit, and steam rose into the air. God! The second one exclaimed. It hit him on the helmet, having eaten it up to his face, and on his hand, from which only a set of snow-white knuckles remained instead of a brush, even without any traces of blood. Calmly. One of the fighters who had just run into the thick of things exclaimed. Inject the medicine immediately. Suddenly, a green beam of a shot immediately flew in his direction. Ah! He was immediately thrown to the ground, only breathing and screams echoed on the ship. Ah! Ah! When the emergency care is completed, go to the medical office. A voice sounded in the speaker. Ugh! The helmet was half smashed. It was impossible to open my eyes. And blood was flowing from his temple in thin streams. He could only see how the monster held the human body of one of the allies with 3 pairs of paws and 8, starting from the head. The body of another lay right in front of his eyes. A head with an open mouth, in which many teeth are no longer in place, one eye is so bulging that it looks like it will fall out, the other eyeball has already fallen out, and lies next to the closed eye socket, connecting with it only with a thin rope of vessels. God! The man who regained consciousness and saw this picture exclaimed. Damn it! That thing! Thought another, lying not so far away. The same fighter with the numbers 01 on his uniform. His helmet was also broken and only fragments were sticking out, and in his hands, he was holding a kind of black ball with glowing blue markings. He wanted to use it on the monster. When suddenly a monster grabbed the fighter's hand with its paw, from which the man dropped the object. With the other limb from the row of shorter legs, the monster waved his index finger from side to side, making it clear that it was better not to do this. SHHH. The monster made a sound. Some kind of light pink substance appeared on his shoulder, from which many tentacles went up. The substance suddenly flopped to the floor and crawled towards the soldier with a half-broken helmet. The tentacle merged with the entire substance, and it acquired larger dimensions, advancing on one of the soldiers. What? He exclaimed immediately. A medium-sized pink ball with an elongated mini-tentacle, as if sucking in a man's face. And one of the monster's paws held the soldier by his left arm, pinning him firmly to the floor. Second. And now the monster began to press the man's legs to the floor with its paws, ignoring his twitching. After a while, the clot regained its small size and jumped towards the monster. He jumped back on his shoulder, waving from side to side with his tail appendage. Jaya. The substance made a sound. SHH. The monster issued his question, to which the pink onion with a tail responded with a kind of love stained with blood. The monster was moving further away from what had happened, and in place of the man's head, lay a completely gnawed snow-white skull with scarlet splashes of blood on the surface. It only sent streams of white steam into the air, and the remnants of pink liquid dripped onto the floor. Suddenly the monster stopped, surprised by what he saw. There was a door in front of him, but it was completely closed. This puzzled him, because he had to follow on. Without thinking twice, he leaned one of the hands torn from the corpses against a palm scanner, thereby opening the passage. Unregistered user. Only the ship's system was minted, which surprised the monster. SH. He said, puzzled, still holding the bloody human limb. SHH. He drew attention to the substance. The pink onion was sitting on his shoulder as if nothing had ever happened, but at the same time it was holding that black ball with blue markings, which one of the soldiers held until the moment of death. Ship. A monster with a protruding spine along the length of its back appeared through the clouds of smoke. He was moving towards 2 workers who were shouting loudly in one voice. Aya. The monster's hind legs are clawed and similar in shape to the fold of a dog or cat's paws, but without fur, and there were only 3 fingers. The man shed tears and screamed loudly in fear at the sight of this terrible monster. The monster opened its mouth, baring its teeth, and immediately a clawed paw reached out towards one of the men. I devour all hostile alien creatures. The monster's mouth was open right next to the brunette's head. Trickles of purple goo trickled down the sharp teeth, stretching between the jaws. One of the monster's paws held the man's head, pressing the eyeball deeper into the victim's eye socket with a finger. The other paw held the man by the throat, squeezing his vise harder and harder. The creature's tail wrapped around its victim, thereby depriving it of movement. And they grow indefinitely. In the middle of the vast cosmos, in the cargo hold of a ship made of cold metal, I had no choice but to admit that I had become a hostile alien creature in a sci-fi survival game. Space survival. This is an RPG game in which one of the various races existing in the vast cosmos is chosen to survive, explore and develop. Sometimes I became a metal gremlin. Alien creatures with metal scales on their backs, from under which clawed paws are visible. It's like sucker tentacles on the head. And sometimes he was a mutating monster. A monster with a marsh-colored skin. Clawed paws with 4 fingers. A mouth with razor-sharp 2 rows of teeth. A little higher on the thin branches of the skin, 1 canine. Yellow round eyes from large to small, so 2 rows consisting of 3 pairs. Destroyed enemies in ground battles, he held a leadership position in the group for collective battles. Glazed skyscrapers. Explosions happen here and there. Alien blue-tinged creatures with large yellow eyes, more like beetle varieties in shape, are flying up to the sky. And even attack the planet. I played for all the cosmic creatures that seemed to come out of nightmares, but there was one species that I was most attached to. The room is plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the bright light of computer monitors. On one of them, the human body, brain and brief information are displayed. On the monitor in front of the guy on a black background with green signs, an image of a monster is displayed. It looked like a large beetle, but with a long ribbed tail, which has a tip at the end. 6 pairs of clawed paws, one of which is shorter and smaller. Behind the back are wings that fold under strong protection, like a beetle. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter. Abbreviated NVKM. I called him Amorphous. He is created in the image and likeness of the creature from the movie Alien. This is a species that endlessly enhances itself with the genetic information of the victims. At first glance, it looked like a scam, but because of the incredible difficulty of survival, the impossibility of dialogue and cooperation with others, it was the worst non-mainstream race in the game. A crowd of people in uniform with machine guns. On the floor lie the remains of a monster shattered by shots. The reason why such a trash race became my favorite was quite simple. This is a species that can freely evolve and become stronger, depending on its choice and will. That's what bribed me. Suddenly, a bright blue window of the system appeared, blinding with unaccustomed. The informational text read. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Baby. Goal. To survive. Special skills. Hypersensitivity. I kept my eyes on the system screen, reading the text. There are claws on my hands. Small ones like that. Clack. Clack. That's how I look now. I thought and sighed heavily, sprawling on the floor. A cub with a bald big head and a scorpion body. The head probably looks more like some kind of fish. And I also have a kind of beard. I like aliens so much. It flashed through my head, and I immediately remembered the monster from the movie, scratching my head. There is no sense in these thoughts. I thought again, looking around. I abruptly turned on my back and, making a loud sound, began to fidget. Ah, it itches. I didn't know that skin peeling is accompanied by itching. I sighed heavily, tired of trying to scratch myself. I am surrounded only by the skin I have shed. More precisely, her scraps. First we need to get food. I'm hungry as hell. I began to think, heading forward. It seems to be a spacious place. But some part of the area is occupied by boxes fixed with striped tape, large metal boxes that are used for large batches or transportation of livestock. By the way, in form it looks like a megacorporation or a star union. I immediately thought, studying and analyzing this area. If they catch me now, they'll kill me right away. Supersensitivity. I lifted the mustache located on my chin, and a light turquoise pulse went from it in different directions. This gave me the ability to scan with my eyes everything that is in these boxes and containers. Oh, there are cardboard boxes of the Black Mice Corporation, and in the other there are barrels covered with some rags. Oh, I found it. I immediately quickly got my bearings, found the object I was looking for and hurried to it. What I need is to be in a dark green container with a panel of numbers. It's good that it's a password. I thought, approaching the panel with my mustache. Let's take a look. And turquoise waves of impulses immediately started coming from me again. 1 2 3 4, really? I was immediately surprised by such an easy PIN code. The level of security in space is simply off the scale. I entered such an easy code, and with the steam escaping after vacuuming, the lid opened. In front of me are rows of bars in beautiful wrappers. That's what an empty stomach needs. Carefully tearing the golden wrapper with small claws, I fished out a chocolate yummy. And she immediately went into my mouth. It looks like I'm chewing on a rubber eraser, but I managed to feed myself somehow. Thoughts flashed through my head. Yes, the taste of this dessert seemed to me in a different light, but it gave me the green light. Suddenly a cockroach wanted to sneak past me at high speed. I immediately reacted to it. More precisely, my tail reacted and the sting at the end immediately pierced his abdomen. I didn't run for long. A cockroach? I was still somewhat surprised by my catch, but the body moved mechanically, there was nothing to be done. Maybe this will do for food? Delicious? I thought, immediately starting to chew the poor guy. Suddenly, the already forgotten window of the light blue system appeared in front of me. The predator effect is activated. Wings. Successful acquisition of genetic data. The abduction of wings among the biological properties of cockroach. Apply wings? The inscription read. Under it there are two possible answers, yes and no. Oh. I was lucky that I got a valuable gene so quickly. Gene abundance is a key element of Amorpha's work. The more he gets genetic information, the stronger he becomes in return. He is subject to evolve into stronger beings. Wings. Not bad. I began to think, delving into the text on the information screen of the system. I immediately poked the yes button with my claw. Well, what's there to think about? What I agreed to immediately began to grow on my back. At first it was just growths. But after a while, thin wings formed under the protection of a solid layer. Good. But the wings of a small size on the back of a scorpion looks strange, but if they give, then take it. Really, how to move them? The way they're on my back, it turns out I should feel like I'm moving a trapezius muscle? I thought about the problem that came right there. It's still harder than it seems. Let's try. I finally made up my mind and walked closer to the edge of the box. Max. I waved my novelty, and my body immediately soared a short distance into the air. However, it still looks strange. It won't do. The weight is too much for this size of wings. I started to quickly devour the bars one by one, ignoring their strange taste. They burn more calories than I thought. It flashed right through my head. Suddenly I heard rustling and immediately looked out, looking at the floor. Cockroaches were running very fast on the floor. So to speak, in packs. In order to use the wings correctly, you need to have the necessary abilities. It flashed through my mind while I was eating another bar, watching the animals. The first goal has been set. Once, the sting pierces the cockroach's body. Crunch. 2. It goes right into my mouth. A clear liquid flows down from the sting my drool after I remove the cockroach from the sting. This is my 20th. I thought right there, counting my victims. Is it really to no avail again? It tastes like a doll. I was thinking, eating another one. As suddenly in the air, the light blue system window appeared again. The text in it read race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Cub purpose. To survive special skills. Hypersensitivity, wings, chitinous shell. Protection increases with increasing level. I thought, studying the new information. Protection increases with increasing level. This is a good ability. I need to provide strong survivability characteristics, but it's not as easy as it seems. Scratching my head, I thought, and immediately sighed dejectedly. Survivability is a characteristic that slows down aging by reducing energy consumption. This is especially true for passive insects and plants. Characteristics significantly reduce the need to cling to food. The bottom line is that if I want to survive, then I have to catch more cockroaches. I immediately began to quickly look around, looking for my victims from different angles. Let's try to change tactics. I climbed up on one of the boxes again, so that the cockroaches could be seen better and so that they would not be wary of me. Why not try to fly again after so many sacrifices? I decided to try to jump between the boxes and try to stay in the air at least a little. But I didn't have to wait long, and it's better to see my potential victims. And this is the majesty of Amorpha? I asked myself a question. No sooner had the cockroaches reacted than I immediately rushed to them, as if hungry. Although we all know perfectly well what I need them for. I immediately grab one of them with my small claws. Crunch. Without missing a moment, I immediately start eating it, starting with the juiciest places. Well, no. I immediately noticed one of my victims running away while I was busy with the first one. This is not good, we should hurry. You won't leave. I immediately took off and rushed for the next course of my lunch. Wait, you won't leave. Ugh. No luck. This nimble bastard immediately disappeared into one of the cracks, and I hit hard. It seems to be about one of the containers. My dinner lurked between two containers. Ha. You can't hide from me. I immediately launched my tail in his direction. Fortunately, I have a long and thin one. It is easy to examine bottlenecks. Crack. I deftly pierced him through with my sting, and the dark green liquid immediately splashed onto the floor. Chic. Chic. He was still trying to dig in, but I don't care. Now he is in my power and I can eat him calmly. Only an unnecessary pair of thin paws fell to the floor. All that's left of the poor guy. Predator's reaction. A voice exclaimed, which surprised me greatly with its suddenness. A system window popped up in front of me again with another informational text at read. Successful acquisition of the survivability gene. Abduction survivability among the biological properties of cockroach. Apply survivability? And the answer options are yes and no. Of course, apply. Immediately I mentally exclaimed and, without thinking, at the moment pressed the yes key with my claw. My chitin has become stronger, and my paws are more muscular. The tail has also become much stronger. Awesome. I exclaimed mentally, rejoicing at the renewal of the body. But it can't be that smooth. It would be necessary to think about something important. The owners of this ship, the people, are my enemies. The vibrations that I feel behind the wall, the barely perceptible noise of footsteps, suggest that there is little time left. In order to avoid the gloomy future that will soon come, it is necessary to pass the cub stage as soon as possible, and for this to expand the scope of activity beyond the cargo compartment. This is just a beginning. I thought, looking around, so to speak, my possessions. It's time to break through that cargo hold where I took my first steps. Where do I go after the cargo hold? I already knew the answer to this question. Slowly moving my legs, I moved along the ceiling. I'm going to the cold room next to the reactor. A thought flashed through my mind. This is an important object, so there will be few visitors. So to speak, I'm hiding under a dark lamp. If it doesn't work out, then you can break the reactor together with the refrigerator and run away. I was still thinking, unscrewing the bolts that held the grate. Soon I was finally able to get into the ventilation. To be honest, they have a pretty spacious one. Let's go. My thoughts flashed. When suddenly there was a strange sound. A huge valve was spinning in front of me in this spacious ventilation. It's so powerful that it wouldn't let me move on. Scary. I was taken aback before such a pressure of air that is ready to take you down. Carefully getting closer, I decided to twist the grill of this fan. A couple of 3 movements and the grill flew away with a clang, obeying the currents of air. If the fan is damaged, people will immediately receive a message, so there is no other choice but to pass, avoiding the blades at the right moment. It's time to rely on Amorpha's abilities. I started the pulse from the mustache again. Iron oxide mixed with air and fine metal powder. I began to reason, analyzing the situation. Rotating blades wear out at a certain point in time and slow down a little. My brain, which has analyzed all the information, suggests that it's time to do it right now. I immediately sent a nervous impulse into my wings and jerked towards the object I needed. All or nothing. I immediately thought sharply. I covered my head with my front paws and rushed to the big fan with just one idea. Slip through. I didn't have a second, but it's better than nothing. The valve just barely grazed my sting at the end of the tail. And I immediately flew away from the valve by the force of energy. Alive. I'm alive. Mentally I rejoiced, sweating with excitement. So, let's see what happens next. I didn't waste any time and immediately continued my long journey. Oh, there's a spider here. After a while, I went to one of the grills of the ventilation passages, hearing some noise. Hey, what about the result of experiment 26? It sounded clearer as soon as I got even closer. Failed. Another voice answered. TC, the head will be furious again. You're a newbie. There's nothing we can do about it because things aren't going smoothly with the boss. One of the men with short blonde hair and dark gray eyes spoke. PFFT, let's get this over with. The second one with a longer shock of hair and blue eyes answered him. An experimental laboratory? I was immediately puzzled over what I heard. Isn't this an ordinary ship? I think they are also supporters of the megacorporation. A megacorporation is a group of people who thrive throughout the solar system. In short, based on the motives of earthly people. Instead of a government, large corporations dominate the country, most of whose members are materialists. Against a background of brightly illuminated high-rise buildings, two figures with their hair fluttering in the wind. Two girls, a brunette and a blonde. Two images. Although many races in the game are neutral, but among them the megacorporation is close to evil. This is the only place where a normal person is turned into a slave. I immediately began to try to unscrew the next screws in order to remove the mesh and get into this room. When this happens in games, reality appears in terrible colors. As soon as the grill was removed, one of the barriers, I immediately flew into this room and sank to the floor. We need to take a look at what we have today. Looking around, I thought. I'll change my course depending on what kind of research ship it is. I immediately started up an impulse with my mustache again in order to study and analyze the terrain. A mutant soldier specializing in ground combat, the Hulk Mutant Research Center. A monster with a green-tinged skin, under which the muscles move in motion. On his head is a metal mask that does not close his eyes just now. Will give me a strong body and fighting abilities. Where they experiment with the superpowers of the cult of the space elf, a girl with outstretched arms, from which lightning emanates around the perimeter. Plum-colored skin, blue eyes without a pupil at all. Horns, rounded upwards, stick out on the head from different sides. And in the middle of the forehead there is a third eye. You can get a powerful psychedelic gift. Personally, I would like to be on the side of the cult, but it's too much to get psychedelic power from the very beginning. I wondered. TM help. Suddenly there was a voice from outside. Help? I was immediately puzzled. Someone needs help? I crawled in the direction from where I think this very voice was heard. And immediately looked out from around the corner. Pain. The voice rang out again. In a tall flask with some substance there was something of a round shape of a light pink shade. Wires were attached to it, and its kind of antenna lay listlessly without movement. Help. The creature spoke again. Bubble amoeba. I thought, examining this something. Its feature is the preservation of oxygen. Skip the topic of food. This is the most useless skill for an amorphous. It suddenly dawned on me. Shall we look for a hint with hypersensitivity? I immediately sent a pulse around the room for the analysis I needed. Electricity? The spherical substance began to emit small lightning currents, which surprised me very much. The researchers talked about this. Ah, here it is. Judging by the hypersensitivity, if you click on this, the experiment will end. I reasoned and immediately pressed one of the keys that my gut told me. On the dark screen, the light strip responsible for the impulses from the creature immediately began to decline, and the pink creature said, "Gratitude. Now you can live as you want." I said to myself. Suddenly there were footsteps, and I immediately felt the danger. Is someone coming? I immediately tried to retreat from there, to fly away as quickly as possible. I sat down on one of the shelves with some experimental subjects also in cylindrical jars. Alas, the wings carried me only to this point, so to speak. Suddenly the door slid aside with a rustle. And there was a click of heels. When will the 26th experiment be able to give results? The first one who entered the room asked. She was a woman with pale, almost ash-gray skin, and coal-colored hair cut into a square. In her hand sits a black cat and enjoys the caress from her mistress. A man crawls on her heels. Most likely, this is one of those who spoke in this room before. He holds a white tablet and sweats from fright. Well, or she's a sick important person that he's so afraid of her. There is progress at the moment, he mumbled, but it needs a little more time. Time is money. The woman snorted, turning sharply in his direction. I need to report the results to the company before I arrive at my destination. If you are unable to achieve the desired result, the company may reconsider the fact of your work and location here. The man was taken aback by this abrupt action and almost threw the bottles off the shelves. Looking back, he clenched his teeth harder from fright. Behind him on a shelf in a glass flask floated a skull with sprouted hair from the inside. KHK? Please don't. The employee screamed, and the boss's gaze only coldly slid aside. Senior researcher, Mr. Adiway. She spoke calmly as she walked forward. The man followed her only with his eyes, sweating more and shaking, as if a horde of insects were crawling over his body. Why yes? Of course, I don't want such results either. She said, walking up to the main cylinder with a pink ball of substance. I am also looking forward to them from a senior researcher. If you can achieve this compliance with Experiment 26, then the position of Chief Scientific Officer will no longer be such an illusory dream. She did not take her eyes off the experiment while her furry pet was peacefully licking himself on her hands. "Q, are you sure?" the employee immediately exclaimed. "Yes. At least, the chief researcher, if everything goes well this time. Maybe we can cooperate with Mars," she said. "They are very interested in this project." But in response to her speech, silence and the man's frowning eyebrows followed. "K. How about going to Ionium?" Finally, a senior employee has become emboldened. "Ionium?" The girl was taken aback when she heard this and thought about it. An awakening drug produced by the Star Union," she muttered, stroking her cat. "This is a drug that we have never tried. There are a few more." The man started, but the boss interrupted him. "I went through all the possible ingredients." Looking at the creature behind the glass and not taking her eyes off, she continued. "All that's left is Ionium." "Good." She agreed all the same. "Act right now." "What?" "Yeah." The man was immediately taken aback, covered with a new perspiration from excitement. If he doesn't assimilate the neutralizer, it will interfere with the life support system. This is a situation where the results of the study should already be known. The woman spoke. "True, but..." The employee wanted to say something, but the boss interrupted him again. "I think you should understand the seriousness. I watched all this, hiding behind their experiments in bottles. And it seems to me quite successfully. Yes. I'll do everything." The man mumbled, and his fingers ran over the keys of the keyboard. "First I'll give him 0.100 milligrams. 0.300 milligrams." The spherical substance immediately began to shake from the impulses that were let through it. 0.500 milligrams. There was a reaction. "Now 0.700 milligrams," said the man, and the ball went in waves right there. "Wait. If there is a reaction, you can increase it even more. Enter everything you have," the woman said, quite chuckling at the result. "What?" The employee was immediately taken aback. "It's not much." He immediately began to mumble. "Get out of the way." She immediately pushed him away and without hesitation pressed one of the keys. Of the three greens, one turned yellow under her pressure. And along the thin tubes that are attached to the substance from different sides, some small particles immediately rushed, as if illuminated with violet light. "Enough." The creature was screaming, which was being violently electrocuted. Painfully. But his voice was heard only by me, but not by these crazy scientists. "Help." The creature exclaimed again. "Help." While the creature was suffering and crying out for salvation, the head of this laboratory looked with pleasure at all this and smiled quite broadly. "Pain. You are welcome." I felt terribly sorry for him, but how can I help him? Painfully. "Help." And soon the creature fell silent. The woman chuckled, considering the result of the experiment. An interesting result. We need more interaction with Experiment 26. In front of her, the same creature was floating in the flask, but no longer an elastic pink ball, but a twisted one. He has more tentacles and they are all different sizes and uneven. "Are you okay?" the employee mumbled. "Yes, let me know if there are significant results," the girl said, walking to the exit door and still stroking the cat. "Sure." The employee only mumbled in response and bowed. Suddenly the woman noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She turned around abruptly and looked at the place where I had been sitting before. Phew, a little more and maybe she would have noticed me. Who knows what would have been waiting for me then. Not seeing anything that interested her, she chuckled and went on to the exit. Just that she turned in my direction. Thoughts flashed through my head and sweat broke out on my face. It's a shame. I don't like all this. Clacking my teeth, I summed up what I saw. It's decided. The clatter of heels on the iron floor receded down the corridor with every second. You'll be dead in a few days. It was either some kind of laboratory or a starting point. Thousands of tubes connected the devices and lined the walls, ceiling, and even in some places on the floor. In the middle of the room there is a hole of considerable size. Tubes also descended into it in a circle. I decided to try something and tried to collect saliva in my mouth. A jet of green liquid immediately shot into the wall. So, let's go. I decided, having thought out a plan of action for the near future. I probed the area with the help of an impulse, which I immediately sent from my mustache. Every part of the ship feels like one with my body. I began to analyze the data, focusing on the impulse. Whoever owns the information owns the world, that's what I need to win the war. I made myself a sleeping place out of saliva. My identification marks are also hung here and there throughout the pipes. Find out where and what the enemies are doing. Where to go. All information, including negotiations, is delivered to me through liquid through all channels. On the 4th day of amorphous life, my nest was ready. Having built a nest, I walked back and forth between the nest and the cargo hold for several days, catching and eating cockroaches with spiders, while having time to peek and collect information. It comes at the same time. I thought, watching through the ventilation grate. Her name is Eugene Kisaragi. He is the head of the research team on this ship. A tall girl in a white suit, wearing a blue turtleneck. There are armed soldiers on both sides of her. Although she is weak in body, she is the most important figure on this ship. And poses an immediate danger to me. There was a case when one of the test subjects managed to escape. 4 columns in a row, but alas, one of the glass columns is broken and empty. While other researchers were confused, she managed to catch the experiment. A large creature as tall as a man. There are a lot of appendages on the head with mini claws at the tips. On the chin there are 2 ossified whiskers also with small claws at the ends. By creating a special tracking device for 2 hours. It's so strange, but at the same time so good for a person. I wondered. Does she have the makings of psychedelic power? This is a unique skill inherent in all races. A power similar to superpowers such as psychokinesis, telepathy, and mental control. However, it is very rare among mankind to meet an individual born with psychedelic potential. Regardless of her talent, this is a situation where armed soldiers are always right. I reasoned, already being in my cradle and eating bars one by one. How to get there? Suddenly a system window appeared in front of me. It's been a while since he's been seen. The text on it read. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Baby goal. To survive special skills. Hypersensitivity, wings, chitinous shell, survivability, paralyzing sting, new, a paralyzing sting. I repeated mentally, studying all the information. This is the perfect skill for a weak me. I kept thinking as I devoured the bars one by one. With this, you can easily defeat at least one adult. A large drop suddenly formed on the sting and fell to the tip of the sting. The duration of the poison is 5 minutes, but this is quite enough. In any case, I have to create a 1-to-1 situation to use the sting, but it's not easy because the soldiers are always in sight. I was upset by this thought alone, continuing my meal. I don't think I'll get an answer if I just think about it. And if there is a chance? With 2 bars in my claws and a third in my mouth, I hurried about my business. Well, maybe, I can't miss a chance. I went back to the room where experiment 26, as they called it, is located and looked around the corner. Joy. Said the substance, a voice that only I can hear. I crawled closer to the flask and paid attention to him. You seem much better than yesterday. I brought food again. I said it, so to speak, and handed him 2 bars. Meal. His voice rang out immediately. I crumbled the candy bar into the equipment compartment. And small particles immediately began to ply through the tubes connected to the pink ball. Delicious. The creature uttered and immediately seemed to glow with happiness. Bubble Amoeba has no special abilities in the game. I began to think, watching this process. She is the only one who is different, having the simple features of another race. Oh, come to think of it, she raised her cat. Suddenly it dawned on me. And if you think about it, she has a great affection for him. I immediately remembered with what love she stroked her pet. If the cat dies, won't there be a loophole? In addition, he is not guarded like Kisaragi, and he is alone in the room, except when the hostess calls him. It's decided. I'll try to catch the cat on the bait. A soft black lump, waving its tail and yawned sweetly after his lunch nap. Meow. The cat stretched out, arching. His name is Caesar, right? I began to think, watching my current goal. Just like that emperor. I was sitting in another branch of the ventilation, and my research target was tumbling on the blue bedspread of her mistress. How can I not gain weight because I only eat meat every day? I pondered, not taking my eyes off. Looking at this one, Eugene Kisaragi is definitely an unusual person. It seems that killing the cat will be easy because it looks stupid. I immediately launched an impulse to explore the area so that I would then be left alone thinking about all sorts of unexpected turns. But definitely not here. At the entrance to this ventilation, everything looks fine, but if you look at it with hypersensitivity, you will notice that it is completely covered with a laser grid. Even a slight touch will trigger an alarm. An ambush. I snorted, getting angry and nervously tapping my tail on the metal floor of the ventilation. The cat immediately heard me and raised his ears up, listening to the noise. Meow. The cat exclaimed and immediately looked in my direction. He rushed like lightning towards the bars, baring his fangs and glaring angrily. What about you? I cursed mentally. The cat immediately rested his paws on the grate, from which he dissatisfied jingled under pressure. What's there? The guards immediately became alert. Where are these sounds coming from? Bam. Bam. It was heard from the ventilation side. The cat restlessly drummed his paws on the grate, trying to climb inside and get something. Rather me. The cat. One of the fighters said discontentedly and grabbed his head. Again? The second guard asked with displeasure. Although it was more of a rhetorical question. God for what? The guards were indignant while I was leaning back trying not to move and was covered with perspiration from fright that they would find me now. I can't believe I made such a mistake. With a sigh of relief, I thought. Attracted attention with his tail. Wait a minute. Suddenly, a thought struck me like an electric shock. The bored cat, provocation, reaction. I was visited by very interesting thoughts. Still, this is not a random twist of fate because it led to a good idea. The plan is ripe. Hee hee. The cat lay back on the bed and began to spin from side to side, playing with his restless tail. Suddenly he caught the sound again and immediately became alert, pricking up his ears on top of his head again. He immediately lifted his head and looked at the ventilation, where the extra sounds were coming from. The cat came closer and saw the slightly twitching corpse of a cockroach behind the bars. The cat was immediately interested in this, and a gleam of interest in this victim appeared in his eyes. The cat touched the bars with his paw, which he even opened without pressure, falling to the floor. The cat, without thinking twice, immediately jumped into the place that interested him so much. Link, link. Only sounds were heard from the body of the cat on the grate. Ringing again? One of the guards asked. It's a cat. The second one answered. Annoying, let's get out of here. Where is he going? The voice of one of the guards rang out again, while the cat was playing with the cockroach's corpse with interest. We have to protect him. The second one grunted. The cat moved slowly and surely through the ventilation, following from one cockroach corpse to another. Maya? Asked the cat at the void, looking out from behind the turn of the ventilation. Further on, a number of corpses continued to lie in the branch. The cat became even more interested in such a game and continued his journey with even more mischief, which colored his gray everyday life. Maya! He exclaimed at the end of the journey. The cat went out into the cargo area, a new location for him. The cat found another shriveled cockroach with a broken body. He reached for it, meow. Without even noticing me. But I didn't waste a second and immediately rushed at my victim. My sting did not completely sink into the carcass of the animal, but I was still able to let in a paralyzing green liquid. Ryer? The animal exclaimed from the palpable pain and uncertainty. Caw. While the victim was convulsing, I hovered over the calf. Caw. Caw. KH. The animal's eyes almost popped out of their sockets and vomit came out of his mouth. The victim didn't like my new ability. I opened my mouth, aiming at my victim. What? It's crazy. I butchered the carcass, plunging my sharp teeth into it and tearing it apart. Divine taste. I admired mentally, greedily eating as if I hadn't eaten for months. From the corridor came the sound of heels, approaching with every second. Another second and the main leader with disheveled hair, the color of resin, flew out of the corridor. The employees were stunned by her appearance and her condition, so much so that they jumped aside in fear. A woman with a confident gait was quickly heading towards a man in uniform who was sitting at a computer and tracking something. She was not alone, but with a guard of 2 men in uniform and with weapons at the ready. Hello, Captain. She turned to a blue-eyed bald man in a black jacket. When will I see Caesar? The enraged woman exclaimed as her lips curled in displeasure. The soldiers are looking for him, the man said, a little patience. It's been 2 hours. She exclaimed, raising her voice, and slammed on the table. She was unhappy with what had happened. He observes the eating regime. She was terrible in anger, like a witch from some swamp. Most likely something happened. She shouted again in displeasure. Dear, the head of the research group, after a pause, addressed the captain calmly. I repeat, we are on a ship. If the cat didn't fly away on the rescue ship and didn't escape, he must be here somewhere. That's why I'm telling you to find him right now. The woman screamed again at the captain's words. She was only angrier at his calmness. I mean, if you wait, everything will come to its senses. Only the captain continued to speak in the same calm tone, and he only mentally asked himself a question. Who is this cat? Damn. If it wasn't for noble capital, the captain was still thinking, gritting his teeth with displeasure. I would put her in solitary confinement right now. What about the guards? The woman exclaimed again, leaning slightly towards him and not lowering her tone. All of them are in custody. The man calmly rapped out. Preventive measures will be taken. But before he could finish, she immediately interrupted him. Execute them now. And the captain was immediately taken aback by such sharp desires. Your captain's authority allows you to command immediately, right? Power has power. The woman hissed, incinerating him with her evil gaze. Anyway, it's too much. The man spoke, sweating. If they are executed, the other soldiers will be outraged. And what? The woman screamed again, clenching her teeth in anger and moving closer to the captain. After. Progress in the search. The captain mumbled. Does it make sense to talk about punishment? All the employees were surprised and even, so to speak, stunned by what was happening. It doesn't mean anything. Captain, the woman immediately turned in a calmer manner, but anger was felt in every word. I think you forgot something. This all happened because the soldiers were not working properly. These words had already angered the soldiers, and they immediately had muscles on their cheekbones. Yeah. The captain began to mumble again, looking down. Me too, sorry. We are fully aware of this. I will take this opportunity to discipline the soldiers. The woman did not take her eyes off him, still breathing fast with rage. The veins on her face were even slightly swollen. She didn't say anything, just sighed heavily and closed her eyes. She was not satisfied with this whole situation, and even more so with inaction. I know. She threw it and immediately turned her back on him. I'll be back in 2 hours. But if nothing works out by then, she said with the same anger, only for a moment turning in the direction of the captain. You'd better leave the position of captain. She left the room, leaving an unflattering residue and spoiling the whole mood. Damn. The captain exclaimed and slammed his fist on the table. Where can he be? The captain asked aloud, not even addressing anyone properly. Where is it? Grinning, I thought, having observed this picture. Already in my stomach. By the way, I was thinking and the window of the system immediately popped up in front of me, this skill wild instinct. What kind of heresy? I exclaimed mentally, watching the letters jump in the field. The system of merging skills. This is a system that combines skills into one. And strengthens them. I used them so often that I memorized all the combinations in the game. I was speechless when I saw the notification text box when I was eating the cat. The text in the system window read, abduction is a wild instinct among the biological properties of the cat. Apply wild instinct? Yes, no, I'm an expert on games, but I've never seen anything like this before. Light blue system window with a small number of lines. The wild instinct skill has been applied. Convergence with the existing hypersensitivity skill is possible immediately. A new system window appeared with a text of different content. A fusion of wild instinct and hypersensitivity. A new skill Predator's Sense has been obtained. Predator's Instinct? Improved skill. Based on the existing skill, you can detect threats in advance. I tried to activate it because it was said that it detects danger. The super-sensible ability was much stronger than before, but the expected effect of predicting the future was not activated. Most likely, this is a passive option that is used automatically. As long as there is no threat, it does not work. I was thinking, moving at a fast pace forward through the ventilation. Well, we'll check it out in the future. What is this woman doing there? She's probably not herself anymore. I was mentally rejoicing at my little victory. Fuck. The main one exclaimed loudly and hit the table. Stabilization takes too long. The woman was indignant, becoming more and more nervous. As expected. I snorted, watching what was happening. The type of person who is sensitive to what is dear to him. If they are deprived of this, they lose control of themselves. And the second goal was also achieved. I mentally summed up the result and smiled contentedly, rejoicing at what was happening. Exactly. The division between Eugene Kisaragi and the soldiers. This created a big rift between her and the guards, who initially did not like the cat. They use the best meat they can't even eat as cat food 3 times a day. The guard watched with envy as Eugene could not get enough and move away from the animal eating selected meat. So a normal person will naturally get angry. In general, everything is simpler than it seems. There was anger at belonging to a class. Eugene Kisaragi belongs to the upper class in the megacorporation Noble Capital. Soldiers who were forced to obey implicitly, they were afraid of the consequences of a direct protest against her, and in the end, they chose the cat as a scapegoat to vent their anger. In other words, the cat acted as a shield. What if the scapegoat disappears in this situation? And what if they had to go through extra trouble trying to find the creature they hated so much? Will the soldiers be able to protect her like before? And not only. Eugene Kisaragi has lost confidence in her soldiers. She lost a most precious thing in her life because of the negligence of the guard. Thanks, cat. I mentally thanked the deceased and smiled contentedly again. It's time to appropriate the genetic data of Eugene Kisaragi. I decided, still watching her torment. What the fuck? She exclaimed, breaking the silence that had just come. She jerked away from the table and quickly moved somewhere. She approached one of the experiments, and her fingers quickly ran over the keys of the control panel. Suddenly, the experiment in the form of a lizard was immediately struck by current discharges, and Eugene only clenched her teeth harder from indignation. It's all because of her. She exclaimed again and moved past the flasks with the next experiments. In one of them floated a rather large head with purple skin, in another cylinder the floor of the alien's body, but without hands, in the third, an alien resembling a small dragon, but covered only with a layer of muscles and an ossified jaw. Suddenly Kisaragi seemed to feel something and immediately looked in the direction of another cylinder. The aggressively minded commander-in-chief was almost growling as she headed for the flask with experiment 26. If you think about it, she said, looking at the pink lump with displeasure, you were there too. Suddenly, Eugene's lips curved in a terrible smile. More like a maniac's smile. Minute. And now Kisaragi confidently presses one of the green keys, which they used with one of the employees to conduct an experiment of the interaction of this creature and the current. Immediately, small purple particles began to ply along the thin tubes towards the creature. Stop. Painfully. The creature, inaudible to man, screamed again. He was pierced by discharges again and again. Help. After a while, she raised her index finger over the button again in determination to press. But something distracted her and she immediately turned back. The woman left the room, leaving the creature to suffer from a charge of current and suffer in agony. I'm madder than ever. Well, what would it be like for you if you observed such a picture? This clot didn't do anything to her, so why should he suffer because of someone's whim? Joy. Suddenly the creature spoke and I was surprised by it. I looked at him. Apparently this entity noticed me and immediately waved one of the branches in my direction, so to speak. But I silently looked in his direction, deciding what I should do. I silently turned around and crawled away through the ventilation. Get away from this office. Get away from him. We can't talk right now. It flashed through my head. Instead of a few words of comfort, I'll give her what she really needs. Revenge. 2 hours have passed. How's it going? Eugene asked, reappearing in the captain's field of vision and clenching her fists. We're going on a search. Only the captain said coldly in response. Wait a little longer. The man continued, but he was interrupted. Captain. Eugene growled with indignation. No, son Samuel. Are you defying the will of noble capital? Kisaragi spoke. She already looked like a zombie. I am the captain of this ship, the man began to mumble, and sweat broke out on his forehead from excitement. The head of the research group, watch your statements. I can help you leave the position of captain. Unable to stand it, the woman shouted. Even in noble capital, abuse of authority is acceptable. The captain of the ship did not lose some calmness and continued to speak, while Eugene was almost grinding her teeth with indignation. I have the right to detain the head of the research group. Detain? Kisaragi exclaimed indignantly. Did you say to detain me? Here and there, the staff looked at her not with good intentions, and they were also angry for her antics. The captain had the right to detain the violator of the order. The man spoke. Are you crazy? Eugene persisted, still screaming. It's all very funny. I chuckled to myself, still watching this picture. It seems that there was a conflict between them even before my intervention. Shit. Eugene snorted and immediately headed away. Kisaragi, white with anger, walked in silence under the protection of 2 soldiers, only the dissatisfied gnashing of her teeth, and their steps were heard. Suddenly she paused at the door with the clear inscription toilet. I'm going to the bathroom for a while. She threw them and disappeared behind the door of the cherished room. Yes. One of the soldiers answered only briefly, not daring to put a stick in her wheels. The door closed right in front of them at the same moment. Hey, I'm going too. Suddenly, he said to his partner and moved, too, in need. The right moment. I exclaimed mentally and quickly moved along the ventilation to the grate that would go out to the women's room. Initially, one guard was supposed to follow her, but he didn't go because he suffered all day. Immediately, thoughts began to swarm in my head as I moved along the winding path of ventilation. In addition, the second guard also went to the toilet. So she was left alone. I swerved again into another turn, trying to catch up with my target as quickly as possible. And there is no security system that prevents me from passing. There can't be a better moment. I decided with confidence, approaching the coveted passage. I peeked out of the darkness, peering through the bars in search of my subject. Eugene leaned on the table where the washbasin was and looked down. We must not miss this opportunity. My gut immediately screamed. I quietly unscrewed the bolts while she was busy with her own affairs and, removing the grill, went outside. Eugene was washing her face so hard, as if she was trying to wash something off with water from her face. While she wasn't looking in the mirror and the sound of the water was my assistant, I climbed the wall behind her back to the ceiling. Having collected all the developed venom within the sting, I immediately tensed up, waiting for the right moment. On the tail, small branches of a wreath of green color swelled up next to the sting, and a small bag with accumulated liquid appeared under the sting, so to speak. While she was still busy with herself, I was getting closer by the second, preparing for everything that could happen in this room. Well, except for one more person in these four walls. We definitely don't need anyone else. Drops of cool water dripped down her face. Phew. She exhaled, dipping her hands into the slightly accumulated water in the sink and relaxing a little. Suddenly there was an incomprehensible sound. And Kisaragi's skin immediately went goosebumps. She tensed and immediately turned in the direction of the sound that frightened her. I didn't waste a second and, like a predator that was starving, rushed at her with its mouth open and its sting out. She wanted to scream, immediately staggering back a little, but the washbasin did not give much space. Either she managed to dodge, or I miscalculated a little, but my sting flew millimeters from her head. I landed discontentedly on a mirrored surface. There's no time to waste. I immediately lunged again and rushed at her from behind. The distance is close, it is unlikely that she will have time to turn around or figure out how to run. My sting reached the target and the green liquid of the poison spread over her skin in black and green thin worms in different directions, penetrating deeper and deeper. Ah. Just flew off her lips, and the effect of paralysis immediately began to spread throughout her body. KH. Ka, only this sound filled the silence in the room. The woman clenched her teeth, and foam was coming out of her mouth. The veins on his face swelled and began to show bumps. KH. She immediately landed on her knees. And then she fell face down on the cold tile. A viscous white liquid dripped onto the floor. It was dripping in big drops in front of her face. In front of her paralyzed body. I could barely contain my animal hunger in front of such a tasty morsel. My view was blocked by a veil that was intoxicating, and I could not think soberly. I was only hungry, and she was my lunch. What is she thinking about now? A thought flashed through my head, and I myself opened my mouth already a millimeter from her face, preparing to have a snack. Does he feel fear from what he saw? He's probably experiencing it. Her eyes are so bulging and her teeth are clenched to a squeak. It's the look of a cornered victim. Is he angry at what is happening? Or is he afraid of death? But it doesn't make sense anymore, her death is imminent. Burn in hell. I tasted her flesh and there was no stopping me. At that moment, I felt like her genetic information obtained from the blood through the stomach by blood vessels reached my brain. And then I realized that one of the guesses contained in my subconscious turned out to be correct. Suddenly, a system window with text appeared in front of me. The cub individual conditions for evolution are met. Do you want to evolve? And the answer options as usual are yes and no. I waited. I rejoiced mentally and opened my mouth, covered with the blood of my victim, contentedly. Without thinking twice, I immediately reached out with my claw covered in blood to the long-awaited yes option. But I was immediately struck by lightning, and a bunch of pictures flashed through my head. One of the soldiers comes into this room and sees me on a corpse. Without thinking twice, he points the weapon in my direction. A lot of shots hit me soon, and now my corpse is floating not only in the blood of my victim, but also in his own. My body was shaking, and I was amazed at what I saw for a fraction of a second. What the fuck was that just now? I immediately swore inwardly. Is this the predator's instinct? I was immediately puzzled, scratching my head. So that's how it works? It turns out that the guard will arrive soon. I immediately began to think about the plan of action. Can I run away? No. I immediately asked. Time with Gulkin horseradish. I immediately climbed up the wall, leaving a trail of blood behind me. I'll kill him too. I thought resolutely, trying to hide. Soon, indeed, there was a trampling of feet. One of the guards went into the toilet and was immediately very surprised by the picture he saw. The guard was dumbfounded and stared at it with bulging eyes, and beads of sweat appeared on his face. His body went limp. In front of him lay the body of the murdered Kisarage, and not far from him was a head with eyes rolled up and saliva still dripping from his mouth. "What for bullshit?" only the man muttered, shackled from shock. But I didn't waste a second. I was immediately behind him. In his blind spot. But he noticed me as soon as he felt my weight. I didn't manage to accumulate much poison, and I just pierced him with a sting in an unprotected area. After all, their helmets are not worth a damn. Blood immediately gushed out in a fountain. Nevertheless, I pierced some important point on the body. The body, like a sack of potatoes, fell to the floor with a crash. That's it, he's ready. His body leaned against the wall of one of the booths and sat as if the man decided to rest. Funny. Without thinking twice, I immediately rushed to the ventilation in order to escape from here as quickly as possible. I don't know when another one will show up. I'll hurry up. Pushing aside the twisted grate, I thought, and immediately disappeared. There is a possibility that I didn't even suspect about some means of tracking, so I'll make up for the lapse and go to the nest. I decided, having thought through my plan of action. I sat in the nest and studied the area with the help of impulses and tuned into the right wave, as if meditating. It's all clear. I thought and looked around once more. Good. Let's go. I finally made up my mind and confidently pressed the yes option with my claw. The text in the system window immediately changed. The evolution process is activated. The cub is an individual. My claws seemed to vibrate, or rather there was some kind of itching. But it wasn't for long, just a fraction of a second. And now large drops of viscous liquid appeared on it, which did not even really drain, but only appeared here and there. I immediately tensed up. But this muck started to appear from everywhere and block my visibility zone. She covered my head with decent streams of discharge, and I completely drowned in her. Then the slurry solidified at the same moment. She became like a cocoon, inside of which I was. I'm like a butterfly. More precisely, a caterpillar in a cocoon. Surprisingly. Did the embryo's memories look like this? I was puzzled, being in the warmth of the slurry. I feel like a completely different being. The slime is pulling something else out of me. I thought, and my chitin crumbled into particles and lagged behind the skin. I want to open my eyes and see how it happens, but I can't. Control over the body is lost, because now I'm in a cocoon. I did what I could. It flashed through my head, and hundreds of bubbles came out of my mouth. It remains only to wait. The nest, consisting of many pipes creeping along the walls with green slime stuck to them, plunged into darkness. Only one ray of light slightly whiter than usual fell on my cocoon in the center of the nest. Soon the slurry began to harden, which was on the pipes, and small particles began to fall on the cocoon. A little time and a vibration passed through the cocoon. Another moment and a deep crack appeared in the middle of the cocoon. Purple-blue skin appeared, prehensile paws covered with transparent viscous liquid, like someone's snot. I first rested on one of the paws, then on the other, in order to get out of my tomb of evolution. I stood on the remains of the evolution slurry that was left to line the bottom of my nest. Columns of steam were coming from me, and I was already more massive than before. Oh, now I don't have claws, but normal paws, with which you can normally take something at any moment. There are more teeth, they are already larger than the previous ones and no less sharp. I straightened up and let out a low cry, as if clearing my throat. My nest is far away and no one will hear me for sure. Head of the medical team, have you determined the cause of death? The captain spoke, folding his hands under his chin. Yes, if you look with the naked eye, the medic said, analyzing his reports. The cause of death is a blow to the throat. It seems to have been done with a small saw, the man continued to tell the information, puzzling the others sitting. But I think I'll find out only after a detailed examination. Detailed inspection. Does that mean we have to do an autopsy? The captain concluded the result. What would you do? After the silence, the doctor was puzzled. Ugh, damn it. The captain swore and sighed heavily, still straining those present. The captain hid his face with his hands and spoke. I don't know. Head of the security system. The captain turned, covering his excitement. How are things with the search? All the surveillance cameras on board were checked, but nothing special was found. The information was minted by a tall man with light hair color. The main suspect, a security guard, is currently being interrogated. Do you think he's a criminal? The captain asked, which immediately strained the head of the security system. If we rely on the information we have today, I don't think so. A man with blonde hair held the answer right there. Let us know as soon as the results are available. The captain spoke. They were all scared and stressed by the current situation. And so. The captain spoke and immediately squinted at the empty seat at the table. You all know what happened recently in the lab. The captain continued. Everyone immediately remembered the horror that appeared to their eyes, and immediately a mask of horror was put on their faces. And it's unlikely you'll forget a headless corpse so quickly. One of the most promising employees ended up in the capsule because of the head of the research group. A faceted high flask with a transparent liquid, inside which the brain floats. 2 round eye proteins extend to it with thin ropes of vessels, and the spinal cord is thin like threads down from the brain. The brain was extracted alive and placed in a laboratory. This awaits everyone who disobeyed, so what kind of punishment will be for those involved in the death of noble capital? The captain spoke, still looking sternly at those present. If you don't want to be electrocuted, leaving only the brain, you have to take action. The captain rapped out, and everyone's faces were already distorted by a mask of horror and insane fear. Everyone was afraid for their skins. Can I say that an accident occurred during the experiment? A man with a chocolate shade of hair expressed his thought. Think before you say that, chief of the navigation group. The head of the medical team spoke, crossing his arms under his chest and leaning against the table. And then how to explain the fact that one researcher died? Oh, so that's it? The brown-haired man sighed. That's why you still belong to Middle Capital. What? His interlocutor immediately exclaimed. What about this one? A man with glasses and a receding hairline exclaimed as he got up from his seat. Due to improper nutrition. He started, but was immediately interrupted. We are mired in the abyss of mud. Someone exclaimed at his cut, raising his voice. If you want to die, then without me. Head of the technical team. What? They shouted back at him. You can't do anything else except cook rice. They retorted in response. Do you deservedly belong to capital? A scuffle between the leaders immediately began, not directly shy of the ship's captain. As if he wasn't there at all. Quietly. Someone couldn't stand it and immediately banged his fist on the table. The disturbances only aggravate the situation. Exclaimed a dark-haired man with a yellow tinge of eyes and a scar crossing the lip line. Everyone immediately stopped at the place where they were. The heads of medicine and navigation stood rooted to the spot, while the head of the technical team beat up his interlocutor. Captain. The brunette turned to the man in the center of their table. Now we are near the planet C08. Is something wrong? The captain of the ship asked in response. C08 is the space dogs zone. The brunette explained. Do you want to make it look like the puppies caused trouble? The captain voiced, trying to understand the train of thought of one of his subordinates. Yes. Confirmed the interlocutor. Let's pretend that we were attacked. Space dogs. A man with a bald head like a billiard ball was thinking. Space dogs are one of the main enemies of megacorporations, as they roam the cosmos and rob. They have extensive experience in interfleet battles. Ships under the command of veterans often get damaged. The research ship could be another target. And the damage will be irreparable. An accident can still happen. If we were informed, the captain reflected, that we had been attacked, the death of the head of the research team could be hushed up. This is the case, the captain finally said aloud, approving the idea of a subordinate, although one thing must be taken into account, but we are powerless with our weapons against space dogs. I have connections with old friends. The brunette assured him, which stunned other managers. Don't worry about that. He never ceases to amaze, the captain thought again, also these connections with pirates. What about money? Only the captain voiced it after thinking. At least 1 million credits. The brunette was stunned by his amount, from which the captain gritted his teeth. Bitch. The bald man cursed inwardly. Eugene Kisaragi is too tough even for space dogs. The brunette continued to push his speech. Therefore, the risk on their part is justified by the price range. Well, all right, the captain finally delivered his verdict, gritting his teeth at this turn of events, but it was the only way out of the situation. Do it. And hurry up to meet the shortest possible time. Thank you, Captain. The brunette said in response and bowed slightly. Let's rely on the head of the crisis management department in this difficult matter. This concludes the meeting. Captain Toto spoke. But immediately the head of the medical team jumped up from his seat, raising his hand. But what to do with the body? After a little hesitation, he still asked. "Save it for now," the captain said. "We'll give it to the pirates. Don't let anyone near the corpse." "That's right." Only a chorus was followed by a response from subordinates. I was in my nest. How I've grown. This adult or adolescent individual is quite large in relation to the nursery size. Now it's clear how to feel like an individual. It flashed through my head. An indescribable feeling. Now it is possible to revise the plan of further actions. Previously, I had to sit in the dark to survive, but now hunting and survival have become identical concepts. A tall individual, as tall as a man. 2 pairs of long muscular arms and a pair of small ones on the chest. The torso is wide, the pelvis is much narrower, a little out of proportion, but this is not the main thing. On the back, the vertebrae acquired appendages that look like a bony mohawk, but on the back. That's what we'll decide. I decided, looking at the system window and crossing my small paws on my chest, while one of the long paws began to mechanically scratch the back of my head. So, what is the next goal? The following text was written in white font on the blue system window. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Individual goal. Survive, evolution. Successful 1, special skills. Predator's sense, fusion, wings, chitinous shell, survivability, paralyzing sting, enhanced exoskeleton, acidic blood. Postscript type? Not defined. The evolution process has been successfully completed. I immediately thought, studying the information. Is this an indicator that I have become an individual? The amorphous has a 6-step branch of evolution, 5 of which goes to transformation. The cub. An individual. The individual is a teenager. A young individual. An adult. And an ascended individual. The latter kind of evolution is considered the ultimate form of the amorphous in the space survival universe. In other words, this is the limit. Upon reaching the last form of evolution, the mystery of the origin of the race is revealed in the game. A monster with a semblance of a bone mask from which 4 bone appendages wriggle in different directions. The tongue is like a bundle of many thin tentacles. 2 rows of teeth top and bottom. On the back of the neck, many small tentacles also grow in different directions. There is a bone covering on the chest, like a bulletproof vest. Where did it come from, who are the amorphs and so on? There is a possibility that something like this may be waiting for me in real life. In order to achieve a full-fledged form of any race, it is necessary to make a lot of effort. I thought, studying the same system window. Only 20 people have seen her all the time. But only I saw the final form of the amorpha. The thought struck me immediately. If you think about it. Thoughts began to stir again in my head. A new characteristic type became available to me. And he ran his finger into the corner with the inscription that interested me. If you look at my stats, will I be able to strengthen my body? I was immediately puzzled, and the text on the system window changed to a question with multiple answers. Unblockable type. Would you like to see the list of types? And the answer options are yes and no. Shall we try? I immediately pointed one of the fingers of the individual at the option yes. Well. As expected, I have almost fulfilled the conditions for strengthening the body. I thought when I saw what the inscriptions had changed to. There was already other information on the blue system window, but no less interesting. There are 2 types available for you. Type of strengthening of physical strength, 6 out of 10. Type of superpower enhancement, 1.5 out of 3. Such indicators appeared due to the transformation, which strengthened the exoskeleton and acidic blood. The type resembles the specialization of the race, but has a slightly different purpose. It is activated only when specific conditions are met. And it is directly related to skills. But where does 0. 5 come from? I was puzzled when I saw this figure. Most likely, 1 ball for the instinct of a predator. I was thinking, still studying the new data. I no longer have the skills that would be suitable for. I was thinking, mentally recalling my meals. Spiders, cockroaches, a cat. There doesn't seem to be anything suitable. I absorbed everything I could. Straining my brain, I was covered with perspiration, but nothing really came to mind. Suddenly it dawned on me. I understood. Eugene Kisaragi. I've tasted her flesh. And I immediately remembered this woman with a cold gaze piercing through. So my guesses were correct and she had psychic abilities. I have to get this power. Time to find a corpse. And I immediately rushed to the place I was looking for, climbing the pipes. It was not difficult to remove the ventilation grate. But to get through them. Ventilation airlocks are now terribly inconvenient to move. It sucks. Suddenly I felt a subtle smell. He was familiar to me, or rather, I immediately recognized the smell of what I was feeling. The smell of rigor mortis. A thought flashed through my head and I followed his lead. Hovering over the room from which such a wonderful aroma was coming, I looked through the ventilation grate. And here he is. As soon as I opened my mouth, drool immediately began to drip from my mouth. It feels like I haven't eaten for a very long time, and now they are beckoning me with a delicacy. Morgue. A thought flashed through my head again. It's like a buffet, by God. What could be more wonderful? The dead man's cell is right below me. There was barely audible music playing in the guy's headphones. On one of the boxes there was a sort of name card or just a signature in order to determine who was immersed in his longest sleep. Eugene Kisaragi read one such inscription. Above the plate is a screen on which an eyeball with an iris and a pupil is displayed in high magnification. Suddenly, something began to fill the room with boxes. The boxes with the bodies were fenced off by a glass wall. At a table almost in the center of the room sits a brunette in a snow-white medical gown and searches for something or reprints in the database, but he is deaf to external sounds that break the silence. Music was still playing in his headphones, which was muffled for me. Suddenly the smell intensified and it strained, so to speak, the observer of this place. What's that smell? The guy was puzzled and, taking off his headphones, followed to the boxes with the bodies. A picture appeared to his eyes that terrified the brunette and he could not move. What the? Only he said. His attention was presented with such a picture as a burned hole in the floor surface from which such a bad smell was coming. The edges of the hole are covered with green slime, which slowly flowed down. I was under the ceiling and watched what was happening, like a hunter after a victim driven into a corner. Acid? The morgue supervisor was surprised and perspiration appeared on his face. From where? Recovering a little from the shock, he looked over his shoulder. Thoughts ran chaotically, but went in a more or less correct direction. We need to call security. But I didn't give him that privilege. I immediately rushed at this kid as soon as he had time to be surprised. My sting immediately pierced through his head. And the body immediately, like a sack of potatoes, fell to the floor on a puddle of spreading brown liquid. Opening the box, in the distance, I saw the open feet of the corpse of the victim I needed. I pulled out the shelf on which it rested. And with a deft movement of his clawed paw, he pulled off the snow-white sheet. Here it is. Eugene's body matched the color of the sheet, the same snow-white. The girl's hair, the color of a raven wing, stood out vividly against a background of it. There was something attached to his neck. Something that fixed the body on a kind of couch, similar to a white fabric tape. She didn't change even after death. I said in my mind. And they are forbidden to touch it. I rejoiced subconsciously at this thought and with a deft jerk, grabbed her head with my clawed paw. And that's strange. Even after killing so many people, I don't feel guilty. I thought, detaching my head from her body. It can be seen that the patch hid this separation. The edges of the cut had turned blue from the onset of rigor mortis, and there were still bits of blood that had frozen on the torn edges of the flesh. They say that when the environment changes, you change yourself. A philosophical thought flashed through my mind while I was enjoying the view of her head because I also changed when I became an amorphous. Or this ruthless killer monster was my real self. Nothing will be solved even thinking about it. The drool of hunger filled my mouth. I immediately opened my mouth in anticipation of the delicacy that I am in a hurry to taste. It's time to eat. I immediately bit, first into her head, then into her flesh. Tearing into pieces and enjoying the taste of his silent victim. To survive, you have to keep killing. Such is Morse's life and his ability to adapt. After death, it will rot and become a breeding ground for nature. So if she's going to be my nutrient, is that nature's providence? Suddenly I got something on the tooth. Something hard and metallic, but it definitely wasn't blood. I opened my mouth in disbelief. A small round device lay on my tongue and was highlighted in blue. Is it from the heart? I took this metal roundel in my left chalk paw and decided to examine it. I don't understand what this thing is for. Maybe she had heart problems. I was immediately puzzled, squeezing hard and thereby breaking the device into small pieces. I was immediately startled by the system window that suddenly appeared. As expected. Eugene Kisaragi had psychedelic powers. On the blue screen, the text read. Predator effect activated. Extrasensory perception. Successful acquisition of genetic data. Abduction of extrasensory perception among the biological properties of man. Apply extrasensory perception? And the answer options are yes and no. What is it? I was puzzled when I received new information. Amorphous can use psychedelic power without supernatural abilities. I was thinking, reading the text of the system window and scratching my neck. And it's nothing to me. I will not think negatively. I decided and immediately pressed the button with the answer option yes. To get the type, I still have to accept. Suddenly, from the elongated layer of my head, many tentacles of medium length and thickness of a burgundy shade burst out. So this is what the amorphous looks like. I thought, feeling my new acquisition with small paws of the first pair of limbs. Interesting. The predator's sense is always activated suddenly. I reasoned, starting on the second, but fresh corpse. Fortunately, it can be useful in combination with other skills. I finished with Kisaragi. I took the man's corpse by the hand and put his palm surface to one of the digital screens on the boxes, but you can still have a snack and security. The guards have some very delicate taste. Maybe because they have a lot of muscles, it feels like I'm chewing hopchin. I reasoned, savoring my victims. But I was distracted by a premonition. A premonition of danger. I immediately distracted myself from eating and turned in the direction from where I felt bad. Changing of the guard. It came to my mind. There aren't many people on the ship in reinforced protective gear. They passed their suit to another. I thought. It was as if I immediately saw them in front of me. So that's what the new ability is. One helps equip the other. The third stands with a gun at the ready and watches. Well, or just waiting for them. Will they change the doctor too? I was immediately puzzled. When the replacement comes, he will certainly notice it. I immediately looked at the corpse of the doctor leaning against a wall in a sitting position. Because this is the space age. Of course, they will think that the monster is also here. And I imagined a lot of people dumbfounded by fright and harsh reality. I'm not strong enough yet to start an all-consuming war with the members of the ship. I was puzzled over the upcoming. Furthermore, I need something that can stall for time until I get strong. It suddenly dawned on me, changing the course of my thoughts on the situation. Well, it was in the morgue. I thought, squinting at the hole in the floor from which a fetid aroma still emanated. Preservatives and chemicals for the treatment of the corpse. An idea occurred to me. Suddenly, a tempting idea came to my mind. Intimidate the ship's crew when they are going through a crisis. Megacorporation does not have an official capital. But there is a place that can be called the center. And this place is Earth. The headquarters and center of the current megacorporation, the 5 companies that contributed to the creation of the megacorporation, are the kings of the Earth. The man who was engaged in farming seemed to sense their presence and immediately stood up. I've been waiting a long time. He spoke to them. The brunette in the suit was wearing sunglasses, the gray-haired one had a mustache and beard, as well as glasses for vision on the bridge of his nose. The brunette looked like someone's bodyguard, the man with gray hair looked more like a butler. Come here. A shaven-haired brunette moved forward, a gray-haired man just nodded after him. What happened? A man with a hoe in his hand asked. About Miss. The shaved brunette started. Miss Kisaragi. The gray-haired man immediately began to sweat in anticipation of the outcome of this conversation. Ah, the third daughter. The disheveled brunette exclaimed. So what happened? He smiled radiantly, not even anticipating any trouble. Her signal apparatus was destroyed. A shaved brunette minted it. This can't be happening. I didn't force Kisaragi to do anything burdensome. The last signal came from C08. The brunette in sunglasses continued. As it turned out, this is the territory of space dogs. Only a disheveled brunette spoke in response. Well. He started and immediately put his hand on the shoulder of the man in the suit. Less than a minute later, a shaved man was hit in the head by a strong fist from Eugene Kisaragi's father. He also threw the body of this man aside with a powerful blow, and blood splashes followed the victim in a train. Mr. Eugene approached the man, who was still alive, but shuddering and covered with blood splashes. And he continued to mercilessly strike blow after blow, but no longer with his fist, but with a metal-pointed hoe. Soon, the slightly twisted instrument, covered with a scarlet liquid, flew to the side. Get rid of it. Mr. Eugene spoke. Yes. Came from behind him. The body was surrounded by a group of men in suits. They covered him with a sheet and prepared to carry him away. I don't need a tool to look for answers to unanswered questions. The most important thing for us is the tools, do you know? Mr. Eugene spoke, clasping his bloody hands behind his back. Yes. I'll be careful. One of the men spoke in response and bowed. 1 billion credits went to Kisaragi's upbringing. This is equivalent to the cost of developing a new battleship. Mr. Eugene spoke and put his hands in his trousers pockets. I made her do a genetic modification to improve her genes. Can some pirate touch this child? I wonder who dared to harm the beloved Eugene family? Wiping the blood from his chin, the man continued to ponder. The captain of the ship Kisaragi was on board was Yuzin Samuel, right? Yes. The white-haired man answered, lowering his head. If this is the Samuel family, Mr. Eugene continued to reason, throwing back the rag, the Titan satellite. That case is gaining an interesting turn. But that's not his job. Edgerton's child is a coward. The brunette said with a smile. He doesn't have the guts to get his teeth into the Eugene family. Ah. He exhaled and abruptly turned to the gray-haired man. What do you think, old man? I think Jan intervened. The man with glasses spoke. Huh, you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Kisaragi's father chuckled. Tane and Edgerton seem to be fighting for control of Jupiter, but in fact they are in cahoots. Because Edgerton's credits come from Jan. This snake is ready to take the lead on the board of directors, you know? Kisaragi's father spoke. Yes. The gray-haired man replied. Chamberlain, the owner of Tian, holds the position of CEO, in other words, he holds the throne of the owner. Yes. Mr. Eugene agreed. I am afraid, seeing that this insolent fool is resolutely aimed against me. Kisaragi's father immediately laughed. And just as abruptly stopped, changing emotions to more serious ones. We have a reason, so we will strike first. Tell your family about it. The brunette gave instructions. Yes. The gray-haired man said, and immediately bowed. C-08 was enveloped in a shadow. Kisaragi's father spoke. Contact them and figure it out. I understood. The white-haired man's reply came again. The bloody wind is blowing. It flashed through his mind. Yuzin Samuel and those suddenly raised his voice, breaking into a cry of a brunette aged who had anything to do with the ship. Bring each of them to me. The one who destroyed my assets, the man continued without slowing down the timbre, deserves to die. He was terrible in anger, especially still in his clothes covered with the blood of the bad messenger. Clouds of steam were floating around. They were present all around the perimeter of the square, surrounding people from different sides. The whitish steam hovered in the air and did not dissipate. This? Gritting his teeth in anger, the captain said. His body was shaking with a small tremor from indignation at this situation. He could barely contain his indignation so as not to explode like a barrel of dynamite. But there is a limit to everything. What the hell is this? He exclaimed so loudly that he could be heard in the neighboring departments of the ship. There was a hole in the wall of the room that had once been a morgue. Clouds of steam came from the floor and rose to the ceiling. He was surrounded by guards. On the left and on the right hand of him stood one equipped guard. In front of him, a group of people in snow-white robes sat in a state of shock next to what had once been people. Now they were either charred or acid-corroded remains. Somewhere the head is guessed, somewhere else the remains of trousers, the other body has only a semblance of the remaining head after exposure to some chemical. The rest of the parts have disintegrated, the hands are a mess, the body is corroded by the floors. You say, after a minute of silence, the captain broke the silence, there was smoke in the room? It's strange, because when we entered, everything pointed to a fire. He muttered after hearing the results of the inspection from the equipped soldiers. All right. Confirmed one of them. I wanted to find out what happened right away, but only doctors are allowed to enter. One of the soldiers continued, to which he received only silence in response. There was mayhem and chaos. Some of the laboratory assistants wrote down a report in notebooks that they were observing at this crime scene, others covered the remains with sheets, hiding the bloody truth from the eyes of others. Here and there lies a lot of mangled equipment and furniture that once filled this area. I don't understand. Finally, the captain spoke, still watching this terrible picture and trying to figure out what had happened. How could there be a fire in the morgue? The head of the medical team decided to examine one of the burned corpses. The hand of the body still had its shape, the fingers on one of which was not melted, which is surprising, from such a temperature, the ring was different. Well, if it was a fire, then why did it remain as if untouched? Judging by the ring, the gray-haired man mused, is this a team member who worked overtime? But suddenly something surprised him very much, and perspiration appeared on his face. He immediately turned to one of the workers, who at that time was taking notes in the report. Are these all bodies? He asked immediately. Yes, why? Only there was an answer in his direction. This can't be happening. The head of medicine muttered. He definitely did not find someone in the bodies present here, and was even more amazed by this. The head of the medical team? This reaction of the gray-haired man did not hide from the sensitive gaze of the captain, from which a question immediately followed. "Captain," the leader muttered, trying to control himself, but arriving still in shock from what was happening. "Call all the leaders of the ship. We have a problem." He was paler than the dead, something scared him very much. "What?" The question sounded in raised tones, breaking the silence, leaving a ringing in the ears. At a large table shaped like a shield, the members of the council, the leaders of a particular industry, are sitting again. "The bodies of the guard and the head of the research team are missing?" The captain raised his voice again, voicing a question. "They couldn't have left on their own, could they?" The captain was indignant at this turn of events. At the same time, he was shocked by what he heard. At the same time, he was angry at this turn of events. "The head of the medical team." He shouted in the direction of the white-haired man. "Are you sure?" "I checked several times." The gray-haired man was justifying himself, and sweat from excitement appeared on his face again. "However, exactly 2 bodies are missing. And that's not all. If we talk about chemicals stored in the morgue, of course, they can ignite, but a fire of this magnitude is extremely rare." The head of medicine finished his speech with his assumptions. "In other words." A dark-haired man in a blue uniform jacket spoke. He was sitting next to the gray-haired man with his arms crossed over his chest. "This fire was created artificially." "Who the hell did this?" the head of the technical team asked, without taking his eyes off the head of the medical team. "Maybe there are unidentified alien creatures on board?" A blond man in a dark gray uniform voiced his guess aloud. He was sitting next to the head of the technical team. His voice sounded calm, in principle, as he himself held himself. He sat with his hands clasped together in a lock. "Is this some kind of joke?" Suddenly, a man with milk chocolate-colored hair raised his voice, from which the blonde was immediately taken aback and jumped a little in his place. "Don't talk nonsense." "What are you?" a blonde man in a dark gray uniform answered sharply, sitting normally in a chair, the head of the logistics department. He squinted at the man sitting next to him, who also scared him. A stout man in the same uniform, with a shock of hair the color of milk chocolate, stubble on his chin. "I just assumed, why are you so nervous?" In response, there was only a soft cough. A more serious problem in the current situation is that the body of the head of the research group has disappeared. The head of the medical team interrupted them. "Haven't we decided to contact the pirates?" The captain spoke up, reminding his staff of his presence. "We need to find the body at any cost. Is that clear to you?" He gave his order immediately, standing up and leaning on the surface of the table. "Find the culprit first." The blond man began, raising his hand as if in school for an answer. "Damn." The captain could not stand it, raising his voice even stronger, from which the blonde-haired man was immediately taken aback and began to lower his hand, covered with perspiration. "It's not just about me." The captain was yelling, staring at his department commanders-in-chief. "If you are afraid of revenge from noble capital representatives, then start cooperating already." After that, a deathly silence followed, only breathing and the tolerable hum of technology could be heard. "Head of the Crisis Management Department, have you contacted the pirates yet?" The captain continued more calmly, turning to a dark-haired man in a blue uniform with a scar on his lips. "Yes," the answer immediately followed without delay. "Right after our meeting." "Damn." The captain cursed, clutching his head. "Don't tell them anything. Tell them we'll just give them the body. Will everything be all right?" The head of the Crisis Management Department immediately asked. "This is your idea," was the captain's reply. "If we don't find a way out, then there will be another problem. Just find the body before you meet them." Suddenly, the captain's hand fell sharply on the shoulder of one of the leaders and squeezed him tighter. "Head of the security department, is it clear to you? You have to catch the culprit." The captain sounded his message threateningly seriously. A blond man in a dark gray uniform was even taken aback by what had happened and turned slightly over his shoulder, covered with perspiration. "We are doing our best," he mumbled in response, feeling the strong grip of the ship's captain on his shoulder. "You're not trying hard enough." Only the answer followed. "You can interrogate all the crew members, find the culprit," the captain said loudly, without slowing down his pressure and hovering over the head of the security department. "I will give you the appropriate authority." "Ahem. We will definitely find the body," said one of them while I was watching this picture through the mesh of the ventilation hatch. "I believe," the captain replied. "What an interesting picture after all. The plan worked." A thought immediately flashed through my mind and I smiled contentedly, baring my sharp teeth. How easy is it to hide your identity and intimidate your enemies? Set a fire. Who would have thought that an alien creature could set a fire in a morgue? I found a cabinet with a lot of test tubes of different colors from dark yellow like bees to ordinary red and green. They were all filled with chemicals that helped me in this difficult task. They stood in an ordinary cabinet behind a thin, fragile edge of glass. Such is the protection of dangerous chemicals. The toxic substance was created from a mixture of chemicals on my finger. I made a small incision, and drops of green viscous liquid appeared on the surface of the plum-colored skin. And a couple of drops of acidic blood. Everything went smoothly, the flames took care of the corpses, however bright scarlet and orange flashes of fire immediately flooded the room, filling the space of the room and black acrid smoke at the same time. I didn't think it would be about aliens. I thought and lay down comfortably. My soul sank into my heels. The captain must have lost his mind to decide to contact this space junk. I continued to reason, still watching what was happening. It seems to be this man. My gaze fell on a brunette in a blue uniform jacket with a black rectangle on the back. The head of the crisis management department, however, I will check it later. Who knows, maybe he's in cahoots with the pirates. Pirates are of different races, so I can get a lot of gene essences, however, an assault can reduce the number of genes I can get on this research vessel. I was thinking, still watching the people already going to their offices. Anyway, I'll make a decision when I find out how good this space junk is. And I suddenly caught something with my location. This guy. My attention immediately switched to an equally interesting character of this entire human team. A heaviside man with a short bob haircut and a stubble. He walked, looking down at the floor and saddened by something. Exactly. Isn't it the head of the logistics department who denied my existence? He has nothing to do with the situation, so why did he say that? The man seemed to feel someone's presence and immediately began to light up on the sides in search of the stalker. He went to a small screen and immediately put his palm so that the device could count his fingerprints. Cargo hold? The door hissed open, letting him into the room. He is the head of the logistics department, so visiting the cargo hold is normal for him, I thought, trying to keep an eye on the intended object, but his alertness looks unnatural. What did he have hidden, since he reacted like that? I approached the hatch grating, the branch of which opened into the cargo compartment, so that it would be more convenient to watch my pig. Wait a second, what is this container? I noticed the location of a large container whose doors were blocked by steel bars attached to the frame. There was also a small screen on the container, which they used to identify the person in order to get somewhere. A kind of combination lock. The trail of the head of the department ends here. Fingerprint scanner and ID card login system. The security of this container is higher than that of others. I was thinking, still looking at the thing interesting to me. Its walls are so thick that I can't find out what's going on inside, even with the help of extrasensory perception. There must be something very important hidden there. I was even curious. I was thinking, putting my finger to my chin, interested in the container. Initially, I was going to eliminate the head of the medical team, but I changed my mind. My next target is this man. Ka. It's time to get drunk. Someone exclaimed and noisily put a faceted glass on the surface, causing the cloudy liquid to jump in the container and spill a little on the table. Head of department, you've had enough. A thin boy spoke, looking in the direction of a heavy man. They were together at the bar and drinking something. One more, one more. The head of the logistics department muttered, handing an already empty glass to the bartender, a gray-haired man with a thick mustache, peacefully wiping a glass bottle. Why are you sweating so much? The skinny kid spoke up again. What has been happening lately is difficult to call life. A thought flashed through the head of a fat man while he was bringing another portion of alcohol to his mouth. He was really covered in sweat, and it's not clear whether he didn't like the temperature of the ship or whether he was very worried about something. Maybe you shouldn't have trusted a colt dealer on the black market? Mentally he asked himself, remembering the pictures of the past. How he himself, standing in front of the merchant, listened to a resident of another planet, a creature with a lilac skin tone, small horns, blonde hair cut into a square, in a black hoodie, and with a small curtain covering half of his face. In front of her, her product was presented like a half-open pistachio, between the shells of which an unknown brown viscous something. She said they were found in ancient ruins. I decided that this could be used to make money, that's why I brought them here. The man began to think again mentally. And in the subconscious, a picture of the past surfaced again, how he delivers a container with the help of a transportation device and looks around. We agreed on a deal, secretly loaded the eggs on board. Everything was fine. But one day, when I decided to drink, one egg hatched. Once again, a thought passed through his mind. And the picture of the past was replaced by another. A blue container with small cells containing glass tubes with metal edging at both ends. In one of the cells from the cylinder, only fragments in the shell of an alien egg remained. If the container had been tightly closed that day. He was thinking again. The present time. A man wanders down the corridor after another binge to his room. "Who's here?" he exclaimed into the void and immediately turned around, peering if there was anyone nearby. But there was no one behind him. Only an empty long corridor filled with oppressive silence. He stood still for a while, listening to all the sounds that could suddenly be heard, but the silence was broken only by his rapid breathing due to increased excitement. Damn. Well, since the fuck was used before, then why not? He just muttered to himself, trying to calm down a little at this moment. It sucks. He cursed again, and his body increased sweating from excitement. Suddenly, he felt some strange smell suddenly surrounding him in this space and immediately tensed up. It seemed to make him dizzy, and in principle it could not help but strain him. That was all quiet without any hints of something, and then suddenly there's a strange annoying smell. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that something had penetrated the ventilation. It has a long tail and powerful hind legs, similar to the paws of some animal. But what is strange, the skin is purple. He was immediately seriously frightened by this. What? It flashed through his mind immediately, but he was silent, as if his tongue was numb from the shock he was experiencing. What the hell? He exclaimed mentally and immediately rushed towards his room with all his might, without looking back, and not even trying to write off alcohol glitches. The main thing is not to check whether the head is joking with him, or everything is actually happening in reality. Damn. Mentally he cursed, still without slowing down. Tears immediately came out of her eyes. He couldn't calm down and calm them down. He really needed to get to the room as soon as possible and close the door behind him. Open up faster. He shouted in his mind, constantly poking at the numeric buttons on the screen. But suddenly the panel succumbed to the entered code, and the door immediately moved to the side with a rustle, disappearing into the interstitial space. The man immediately flew into the room. More precisely, he fell like a sack of potatoes, not calculating that the barrier in the form of a door would disappear so quickly, and he would lose his balance. Empty glass bottles were lying around him, and one of the slippers had left his hind limb. Telephone. The man stammered. "I need to make a call." Trembling with fright, he crawled towards the object he was looking for. A red handset on a red platform with a digital panel. Peek. It was heard outside the door. A sound that brought even more fear. Drool dripped from his mouth every now and then, and sweat trickled down his skin. Peek. He understood that it was the sound of the code buttons on the panel in front of the entrance. The number of digits in the code was getting smaller. He turned towards the door, and tears started coming out of his eyes again. Pipic. With a rustle, the door disappeared into the interstitial space again. In front of him was me in full height. His terrible nightmare from which he tried to escape so quickly. And now he's shaking and drooling, crying his eyes out. He can smell death. He sees a big monster in front of him with burning eyes and drooling from hunger. I slowly approached him, delaying the moment of pleasure. They say that the meat of a victim who experiences fear has its own wonderful taste. I loomed over him, showing a wide mouth and a lot of razor-sharp teeth, which drooled every now and then from unbearable hunger. And he just shakes and cries. "Enjoy your meal." I just said it to myself and immediately bit into my victim. It was easy to kill him because of his cheeky lifestyle. Thoughts swarmed in my head as I looked around my victim's room. A bunch of empty bottles, a pack of cigarettes, some books, sheets, scattered things. And a word, junk. He spent all his time in the bar. I also found crumpled things in the drawers. There are empty cans of something on the dresser, scattered socks, uneaten soup. A real salary thief. I thought immediately. The captain should be grateful to me. I thought and grinned. Because I am reducing the number of people in the state who are paid salaries in vain. I justified my attacks immediately. I would clean up here a little. I thought as I wandered through this pigsty covered in blood splashes. Blood everywhere, especially where the victim's body was. The wall and part of the floor are smeared with it. It's fucking dirty. I swore. Where is his ID card? I thought with a heavy sigh. Wherever I have not looked for her among this junk, but she was not even close, which is not very pleasing. A medium-sized poster of a model in a scarlet bikini caught my attention. On pale skin, it looks quite impressive. And the hair is an unusual color, the color of seawater. although this color is pale against the background of the skin. She looks sexy, but I don't feel anything in such a body. I thought, crossing my little paws on my chest and sighing in disappointment. I continued to search the room when suddenly the object I was looking for finally fell out of the bright yellow folder I had just taken. Namely, what I was looking for is an ID card. A thin rectangular plastic of small size with a blue stripe at the top and a stroke under it on one of the sides. Great, I found her. Mentally, I was immediately delighted. On the other side of the map I saw a photo of my once-eaten lunch. I've collected everything I need. I mentally decided, taking the key card and the left hand of my victim for this. And, before leaving, you need to clean up after yourself. I decided, squinting at the severed head of a corpse with rolled eyes and covered with splashes of blood. The head of the logistics department is not very tasty. I decided, continuing to finish eating the still fresh remains of the corpse. He stank of alcohol all over. I could feel the smell of alcohol mixed with the metallic tint of the smell of blood in the air, and the taste of meat is given bitterness. Having finished with the corpse, I went to the container, which interested me, and for which I tried to get the keys to the entrance. It was already evening and there were few people, which meant that it was possible to take your time. I inserted the ID card into the hole above the digital panel with bright blue stripes. To the screen, streaked with bright blue lines in a small square, I put my left hand, covered with blood, which at the same time stained the surface. The container doors opened and white steam swirled across the floor. I went into the container and saw tall cylindrical flasks lined up in rows on either side of me. They were cold, and the walls were fogged up from the temperature difference. Look what he's been hiding here. Cryo cameras? I was surprised to see all kinds of alien creatures inside them. So he was a smuggler. I decided right there, watching this picture. My attention was suddenly attracted by another container, but already inside, and I immediately turned my head in his direction. To be more precise, it was a small blue box with many cells containing glass cylinders, but smaller. An amorphous egg? I was surprised to see the remains of glass and the eggshell from the hatched baby on the place of the broken cylinder. Exactly. It looked like the petals of an open bud of dark green color with ribs on the petals. One egg is empty. Having examined the shell closer, I thought. Did I hatch out of it? I immediately had an obvious question. I took an egg by one of the petals of the shell. It looks like a wilted flower bud, quite interesting. So this bastard tried to smuggle me out. I thought, examining the ribbed surface of the shell. Although the starting location is the Amorpha in the game is not this ship. The ceiling in a blue-purple stripe hung like swollen pimples, sprinkled with small yellow speckles of some crystals. From the surface of some of them, green slime drips, some bulges are completely stuck in the column of this slime that connects the floor and ceiling. On the bumpy floor, where residual mini rocks are sometimes visible, there is a coating of the same green slime in which, as if on a soft mattress, the same amorphous eggs are located. Somewhere on the surface there are small pyramids with gilded drawings. And the mysterious ruins. I don't know what happened, but the owner of my body left the container immediately after hatching. The wall of the container is covered with a transparent flowing viscous liquid, similar to saliva. A trail of egg fragments and such goo stretches further from this box, deep into the container. Apparently, he died shortly after due to lack of food. But then I moved into his body. This explains why cockroaches seemed so delicious to me. I let the shell fall to the floor among the rest of its fragments. The body must have moved instinctively, striving to survive. Oh, I'm getting nervous. I knelt before the shell and put the palms of my little paws together, pretending to worship. Mail his memory. And now, you can forget about etiquette. I got up in a moment and looked around, and do what befits an amorphous. I grabbed 2 eggs of my brother's from a small container. And immediately began to eat them greedily. While killing other cubs in the bud. The amorphous one that hatches first devours other eggs. I took one after the other, devouring one by one. Sucking out the internal component and the juices that are still contained in them. It's a pity there was no message about the activation of the predator effect. Well, it's not that important. I thought, licking the remnants of pale yellow goo from the surface of my teeth and mouth. Because there is a lot to eat here. I thought in anticipation and looked at the contents of the smuggler's container. Cryo capsules with all kinds of alien animals, something else was in sealed cardboard boxes. And it's all mine now. Great. I mentally exclaimed as soon as the blue system window appeared in front of me. Race. Unidentified hostile space creature, NVKS, condition. Individual goal. Survive, evolution. Successful 1, feature. Predator's sense, combined, wings, chitin shell, vitality, venom glands, combined, enhanced exoskeleton, acidic blood, psychic organ, strong legs, the ability to imitate sounds. Type? Not defined. Currently, 2 types are characteristic of you. Strong body, 8 out of 10, strong psyche, 2 out of 3, the information on the system screen read. There are only 2 points left to get the strong body type. I decided after studying the information given to me. To be honest, I was disappointed when I finished the Kisaragi. I was thinking as I left the container I had cleaned. Instead of a psychic ability, I got some kind of useless psychic organ. But the head of the logistics department gave me such a generous gift. I jumped from container to container hurrying towards the exit. Strong characteristics that can only be obtained by the middle of the game. Characteristics that will allow me to eliminate crew members more efficiently. When I reached the coveted grate of the ventilation hatch, I immediately climbed into it and began to move forward slowly but surely. Thanks to them, I will be able to act more actively. A meeting with space dogs is also not far off. I was still thinking about the further plans that await me. I don't know how dangerous they are, so I have to get stronger before I meet them. Wait for me. Even if you scream, no one will hear you in the boundless space anyway. The pitiful cries of the crew of this research vessel will be buried in the black abyss. The runway of the research vessel megacorporation. A lot of high elongated hatches through which the boundless space is visible. Planes of new turns of technologies for space. Large cars similar in shape to submarines, but on tracks. Hey Scott. A man with wheat-colored hair disheveled in different directions, a thick beard and mustache of the same color called out. Yeah, I'm almost done. A younger man answered, but with styled hair that was touched with gray. He was twisting something inside the new space technology. Is there much more to do? A man with a towel on his shoulders asked, not taking his attention off the approaching Scott. That's enough, he said in response, we have to tinker with it over time. Ha, fucked up. One of them cursed. I still can't figure it out. Scott said. What exactly? The man with the beard asked. This is a maintenance order. Scott said. Space canteen. High ceilings, which are not possible to reach. Hatches in the walls through which you can see the cosmic night and billions of stars or nearby planets. The tables are wide, but also not too long, with the ends going down to the bottom and attached to the floor of the ship. Each table has rotating seats in a black shade with a light blue stripe on the backs. At each table, bent over their tray, the workers took food. Even if there is a fight, Scott persisted, tapping his spoon on the edge of the food tray, why reassemble the planes? Hey Scott. The man with the beard couldn't stand it. Do you really want to talk about work while eating? A towel is still slung over his shoulders, and a piece of green jelly-like food for astronauts is stuck on his fork. What's wrong with that? The partner was surprised. Fincher, think about it. I've been hearing, Scott continued, dropping the tone of his voice to a quieter one, as if he's plotting that we're getting ready to hunt a metal gremlin. If we meet a metal gremlin, then there won't be a wet spot left of us. His partner exclaimed in response. That's not all. Scott wouldn't let up. They say that this gremlin is already on board. What? Fincher was taken aback when he heard this news. You can smell a strange smell, Scott retorted, hinting at the strange clouds of green haze that hovered in the air every now and then. What is in the air? It's the smell of a metal gremlin. He assured me. On top of everything else, a friend from the catering said that people had started disappearing since last week. Ha, what nonsense. Fincher only snorted in response and continued to devour the food given to him. I've heard something similar, too. Suddenly, a man in round-lensed glasses sitting next to Fincher exclaimed. In addition, the head of the logistics department has disappeared somewhere. In this regard, the cargo bay manager was appointed acting head. Their neighbor blurted out the information right there. Really? Fincher was immediately taken aback by what he heard. You see, Fincher. Scott immediately exclaimed, glad that his words were confirmed. I'm right. Good. The man spoke after listening to 2 points of view, or rather the flow of information. Let's say people started disappearing. Then why are the bosses inactive? I heard, their neighbor at the table immediately began, that they were hiding it to avoid unrest. The metal gremlin is to blame for everything. Scott exclaimed immediately. I do not think so. He said as Fincher snapped and immediately got up from the table. What do these losses have to do with the maintenance of fighters? Fincher could not understand in any way and, taking his under his nose, wanted to leave already. I don't know. Said the guy with glasses. I've only heard of disappearances. Um. Scott started. Are they trying to work with discipline in this way? He decided to assume and immediately caught the displeased look of his partner. Even with a hint of threat. Well, maybe you're right. Fincher threw back and walked away from them, and Scott just scratched his head. The runway of the research vessel. The light is extinguished, and only under the sight of one of the fighters it burns and someone's legs stick out. Fincher came closer and saw his partner fixing something there. Scott. He turned to him immediately. I want something to eat, do you want something? No. Without distracting from the case, the partner replied, still continuing to twist the bolts. It's better to bring some synthetic alcohol with you. Scott threw Fincher in the wake. Good. He agreed in response. Damn. Scott swore. Will I be able to finish everything today? The man continued to work in silence, only the barely audible hum of technology broke the silence. Scott, come here for a minute. Suddenly a man heard someone's voice and was immediately distracted. Cameron? He immediately called out to the voice carrier. I'm busy right now. Scott muttered and continued to twist the bolts in the mechanism. It won't be for long. The same voice was heard again from outside. Scott? The newly arrived night voice persisted. That's it. The man wanted to swear mentally, but only clenched his jaw with indignation. If you call for any trifles, beware, there will be no mercy. Mentally, the cattle were angry, taxiing on a small special board from under the fighter. But he was immediately puzzled when he saw only emptiness in front of him, but not the one who was calling him so hard. He's mocking me. He called, but he left. The man was surprised and sat down, looking around. Here. The voice that seemed to mock him rang out again. This time it comes from the doors that are wide open ahead. From the darkness in which nothing is visible. Hurry up. Maintenance room? Scott was surprised. He approached the door and looked inside, guided by the voice that was calling him so persistently. Scott, this way. That voice rang out again. What are you doing there without a light? The man was surprised, looking into the impenetrable darkness. I'm looking for something. The voice answered again. Come on quickly, help me. The voice spoke again, and Scott walked into the darkness of the room without a second thought. He began. How people annoy me. He thought, not straying from the path, making his way with a flashlight. What's that smell? He was surprised when an unbearable stench hit his nostrils, and he immediately covered his nose with his palm. It looks like a rotten fish, but somehow different. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Where are you, you bastard? Scott exclaimed, continuing on his way anyway. Here I am, here. The familiar voice rang out again. Without shining his light on the floor, he did not notice a large bolt and immediately stood on it, which caused him to lose his balance. The bolt rolled out from under his foot, and he fell to the floor with a crash. Hey, he said, rubbing his bruised head. Wait a minute, a thought suddenly dawned on him, somehow all this is suspicious. Even if you turn on the flashlight, it's hard to see anything in such darkness. Squinting at the fallen object, he thought, but without moving from his place. What is Cameron doing in such pitch darkness? In addition, the head of the logistics department has disappeared somewhere. Suddenly Scott remembered the words at lunch. In this regard, the acting head was appointed cargo bay manager. I heard that people have been disappearing since last week. The metal gremlin is to blame for everything. It finally hit Scott as soon as he remembered his words in the dialogue. "'Kay, Cameron?" Already stuttering, my victim asked into the void, crawling on the surface of the floor. "Sko-o-o-ot." I drawled, imitating my voice less assiduously. "Cameron?" Scott asked the question into the void again. Without stretching out the calm before the storm for a long time, I immediately grabbed his head and pulled him to me. "Oh." I pronounced the syllables with aggression and prepared to devour my stupid victim. My eyes were burning with a hungry spark, and steam was escaping from my mouth. Only the crunching of bones and the screams of the victim broke the silence that night. The ability to imitate. It turns out to be very useful. I thought as I ate my delicious food and savored every bite. "Scott." Fincher was calling his colleague. "I brought alcohol," he said, looking around and carrying a bag with something in one hand, in the other a box with bottles of green glass with a burning liquid inside. He was surprised to notice the left tablet and the tool without attention. Where did he go? The man was puzzled. He is not one of those people, the man thought, looking under the fighter, who abandons what he started halfway. "I'm in the maintenance room." Scott's voice came from somewhere to the side and from a distance. Fincher was surprised. Nevertheless, he went to the maintenance room and looked inside, passing the door that was open to swing open. Why did you go there? He asked a question into the darkness. I had to find something. Scott's voice came out of the darkness again. What are you doing there without a light? The man was puzzled, but he stood at the door and did not move from his place. I need to move something. Help. His partner's voice rang out again from somewhere in the depths. Oh, that's it? Fincher muttered discontentedly and, with a dejected sigh, headed deeper into the room. He walked straight, lighting his way with a flashlight so as not to fall and immediately find a partner. Or even reprimand at all. Hey, what the hell are you doing here? A man with light brown hair snorted, highlighting the way. But in the place where he expected to see his partner, there was only another flashlight lying unattended. Hey. Why here? The sandy-haired man started and pulled his hand towards the unattended flashlight. When suddenly something viscous, warm landed on his back. A feeling as if something was flowing down, dropping drop by drop, stretching from the shoulders down the spine. And the smell. Suddenly, the smell of metal seemed to fill the room. And not the one that usually came from the hardware in this room, they have more of a smell of fuel oil, gasoline, right there it is metallic. What? The man was puzzled and immediately touched himself, where a strange feeling was once present. He removed his hand from the back of his head and looked at the open palm. That's what this metallic smell is in the air. The palm is almost all scarlet. Blood? He asked aloud. He voiced a guess that is as clear as day. What? Stuttering, he shouted, and goosebumps already ran down his back and continued to beat with a small tremor. He was still sitting on the floor, his legs seemed to be shackled by some invisible fear that swept over his head like water that suddenly arrived. He turned the flashlight sharply in the direction where he caught a strange sound. The sound is like liquid dropping drop by drop to the floor. He shone the light in this direction and, alas, not a flattering picture appeared to him. Eyes raised to the top, so that the iris of the eye is barely visible behind the eyelid. Released capillaries on the surface of the protein. Haggard cheeks, as if the victim had been starving for a long time or all the juices had been sucked out of her. Her hair is a little disheveled. From the eye sockets, bloody tears flow down the cheeks and, mixing with the blood on the neck section, it falls to the floor in a viscous stream. I'm here. I've already said it in a broken imitator's voice. I was on the ceiling, holding on with the help of tenacious paws. In one of the long powerful paws, right in front of the next victim, I hold the severed head of the so-called Scott. How wonderful it is to watch the grimace of horror that immediately appeared on his face. I did not wait for something and immediately rushed at the victim who wandered into my trap, ripping open his belly right there. Do I have a talent for fishing? Or should I say hunting? I thought, tearing off pieces of fresh flesh over and over again and savoring them. Imitation. What a cool ability. I thought, continuing my feast. Torn off the top of the body, with intestines and other entrails spilling out on the floor. The head is open like a jar of stew, from which a jelly-like brain is now peeking out. The head is frozen in mute horror, only a trickle of blood flows from the mouth to the floor, forming a scarlet puddle. Among the creatures that the head of the logistics department tried to smuggle out were red worm larvae. Red worms are giant earthworms that live on desert planets. And having the ability to imitate sounds made by other living beings. An alien creature similar to a horse, but not quite. On the head there is something similar to a bone covering a shield, so to speak. On both sides of the head at the mouth there are two medium-thick short tentacles. The animal makes a sound, and something hiding under the embankment repeated it exactly. Rumor has it that these creatures have evolved to hunt other creatures more effectively in harsh realities. A huge creature whose head is divided into several parts, like a flower bud, but on each of its petals, there are rows of small sharp teeth along the edge. He easily swallows his victim whole. It's great that I managed to get hold of the essence of the red worm gene, I thought, feeling a neoplasm in my larynx inside. However, the resulting ability is inferior to the original one. I can only imitate the voice of the last victim. I thought as I put Fincher's head in my mouth. Well, it's a great skill anyway. Tomorrow I'll have to eat someone from the catering. I pondered over the plan of action, devouring my captured victim piece by piece. It seems. Is his name Pierre? I recalled the information I had heard before, which I had specially collected for further actions. I don't think he's close to Fincher, but it's not that important. Tomorrow I'll have dinner with Pierre. I thought, licking the remains from my paws and fantasizing about the taste of my next delicacy. I hope the bubble is doing well. I slowly but surely began to unscrew the loose bolts and slowly unfasten the grill, thereby freeing myself up again into the ventilation hatch. although it is rather strange to refer to it simply as bubble. I mused as I made my way through the ventilation hatch. From now on, I'll call him number 26. Maybe you should look at him before you go to the nest? I moved slowly but surely through the ventilation, trying not to make a lot of noise and not attract too much attention. Hi. Suddenly, I was hit by an electric shock from a voice suddenly appearing in my head that I even stopped and did not continue on my way. Is this really how the psychic organ works? I thought immediately. After all, only recently my thoughts were about number 26, and now I have contacted him telepathically. I didn't think I would be able to communicate with beings who talk through waves. In any case, the tentacles under the head on the back of the head immediately moved. You should say hello. I let out a hiss that meant hello on waves captured only by the bubble. Hi. He answered again. And today I'm hungry. Food. This guy's vocabulary has grown significantly since the last meeting. I reasoned after what I heard. Does psionium have an effect that I don't know about? I let out a hiss that meant sorry. I continued the dialogue, making my way further along the ventilation. I let out a hiss again, which meant it would be difficult to get food today. What is the difficulty? The bubble was perplexed. I let out a hiss, which meant I won't be able to get it, followed by my answer immediately. Whimper. It came from number 26. I understand he's disappointed. I was thinking, making my way further and further along the ventilation hole. But it's dangerous to use this passage now. After the disappearance of the body of the head of the research team, the head of the security department increased the security of the laboratory to the maximum. I was still thinking, moving in the right direction. Now even the ventilation shaft above the laboratory is a threat. Because of this, I haven't been able to bring him a candy bar for several days. I thought and sighed heavily, realizing the whole situation. All I can do is talk to him. I let out a hiss, which meant, I'm leaving. I gave my voice again. While. Come again. It was only me who answered. TSK, hang in there. I mentally wished him and headed away from the laboratory. I will be able to help him only after evolution. I began to think, moving away from him. The problem is that it is quite difficult to evolve. The user needs to kill 10 representatives of 2 intelligent races each and get gene essences from them. This is the only way to evolve. There are only humans on this ship, so evolution is impossible. I was thinking, turning again at the fork of the tunnel. There are still pirates, but nothing is known about them yet. Suddenly, with the help of the impulses of my locators, I felt that a person was walking under me, or rather under the ventilation branch in which I was, and talking about something on the phone. I immediately tuned into this droning in order to hear it more clearly. It was none other than the head of the crisis management department. Work? I'll get in touch. I recognized fragments of dialogue. Nearby. S. Oh, yes, this is the head of the crisis management department. I thought immediately. Who is he talking to there? Yes, everything is going according to plan. The man spoke again. Yes, yes. And? Suddenly he tensed, hearing something in the headphones, which are not immediately noticeable to the eye, and stopped. Did the order come from the family? He was surprised at the same time. No. The man stammered and closed his eyes. Who am I to doubt? And sweat broke out on his face. In any case, everything is going well. Mrs. Kisaragi has already been eliminated. He told the information and quickened his pace. The ship will arrive at S08 according to the plan. All orders of Captain Meteor are recorded. I heard it again. What? I tried to keep up with him and followed him. Yes, it's all right. The man said again and put his palm to the small reading screen. The screen lit up with a bunch of twisting bright blue lines. Everything should go according to the will of the family, or to be more precise, G and Eugene. I'll be happy to accept it. He spoke again and headed into an open passage to another room. Understood, before the connection. It turns out that this little man is a sneaky fox. The significance of this conversation began to dawn on me. So the bastard had betrayed the captain. Judging by his conversation, is he up to something? I think I'll have to wait and watch him to see if his actions will benefit me or harm me. Head of the security department. The captain shouted again in raised tones. How the hell do you do your job? Sorry. A blond man in a uniform and gray shades began to mumble in response. How many times have we heard these apologies? The captain of the ship did not let up. The meeting with the pirates is in 2 days. And you still haven't found out anything. We have increased the number of surveillance cameras and security. The head of the security department spoke. To hell with it. The captain immediately shouted back. Head of the navigation department. How many people are missing? The captain asked a question to the man next to him. 8 people, a brown-haired man with thick eyebrows answered after a moment. Including the former head of the logistics department. The head of the research group is dead. The captain of the ship continued to be indignant. 7 more people were missing. Why haven't you found the culprit yet? Are you in cahoots with him? No way. Stuttering came the reply. I was sitting at this time in the ventilation hatch and enjoying watching what was happening. I'm sorry, I thought, putting my short paws to my mouth, but the criminal is next to you. Damn. The captain of the ship swore. He gritted his teeth in displeasure, but did not raise his voice. I think the head of the security department is not lying. The head of the crisis management department spoke. What did you say? The captain immediately asked, turning to the brunette with the scar. I also checked everything. The head of the security department did everything he could. The head of the crisis management department immediately answered. The criminal has not been caught, the captain said aggressively through his teeth, and you are also protecting him. The captain was surrounded by an unkind aura, which, in principle, was to be expected in connection with what had happened. I want to say. The head of the crisis management department spoke again. By human standards, the dark-haired man with the scar said, no one is able to hide such a thing. The metal gremlin is just a rumor, he continued to express his point of view. Perhaps we were attacked by someone we don't know about. I was surprised, still watching what was happening. Why has the atmosphere become so strange? Listen, said the head of the navigation team, the head of the crisis management department. The AI installed on the ship used to be on the battleship. If there was any living creature on board, it would have been discovered long ago. The brown-haired man told his guess. I served in the army, I know how AI works. The brunette replied, crossing his arms over his chest. However, everyone knows about the container, which the head of the logistics department was able to carry out. All the cryo chambers were empty. An empty container is just a cryocamera without anything and a pile of torn boxes. Where did those who were in them go? The head of the crisis management department asked, providing new information. That's it? I cursed mentally. What I was most afraid of happened. According to the present head of the security department and the head of the technical team, it became clear that the news for them was not particularly joyful and now sounded publicly. Well, the captain spoke most calmly, which is quite surprising. Suppose a space monster is running around the ship. The question is, where is he wandering, since no one has seen him? There is a place, the dark-haired man with the scar immediately exclaimed, which we have not yet examined. He pointed somewhere up there. Ventilation? A whisper swept through the office when everyone immediately looked for the pointer. Ventilation shafts are located throughout the ship. The head of the crisis management department spoke without lowering his hand. In addition, they are about a meter high, which is enough for comfortable movement. Meter? There were immediately questions from the side. It's not enough to kill someone, isn't it? The metal gremlin is 80 centimeters tall, the dark-haired man with the scar explained, but it can destroy an entire battleship. Is this guy's name Arnold? I immediately began to recall, not very happy with the news I had heard. I should have taken the risk and eliminated him while I had the chance. If that's the case, they immediately started questioning the brunette based on the information they heard, as you say, then are we in a complete ass? If this thing ate the body of the head of the research team, we're finished. Just take it live and hand it over to Noble Capital. The head of the crisis management department calmly replied. If it can be established that it was he who ate Kisaragi Eugene, then they will believe it. And what to do with pirates? The head of the technical team immediately asked. If there is no body, then we will have to fight him. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke. To win the war, you need to control the situation from the inside. And in order to protect people, it is necessary to deal with the monster. At this time, the captain sat and listened attentively to the conversation of his subordinates, thinking about something. How many soldiers do you need? The ship's captain finally voiced his question. I'll take 6 people out of 8 squads. The dark-haired man with the scar calmly replied. All right, I'll let you. The captain spoke. I hope the inspection of the ventilation shafts will bear fruit. Thank you. The head of the crisis management department answered only briefly. At that time, I was already trying to retreat from this place in order to think about the course of further actions faster. Judging by Arnold's identity, he will put a guard on the ventilation. I thought, twisting the bolts. But the ventilation compartments are actually sealed. Even if you reach the end, there is nowhere to go. I was still thinking the same way, fixing the grid on the opposite side of the shaft. There is a surveillance camera in the corridor and the ventilation passage is blocked. If I leave the nest, I'll have nowhere to go. I deftly bounced down the pipes and went down. The corridors are crammed with CCTV cameras and the ventilation shafts are unusable. It's time to make a choice. I landed on the already solidified green slime that lined the nest and headed into its depths. Run away? Or resist? He was puzzled and lay down, folding his smaller paws under his head. My upper body sank deeper into the muck, or rather into the cocoon formed with reddish growths on the walls. Closing my eyes, I again remembered the words of this man, which began to flash in my brain like pictures, and his voice was on hearing. By human standards, no one is able to hide such a thing. I remembered again how he pointed to the place where I was hiding, as if he could see right through. Ventilation shafts are located throughout the ship. In addition, they are about a meter high, which is enough for comfortable movement. His amber eyes gazing upward. A look that seems to look into the soul. Just take it, live and hand it over to noble capital. If it can be established that it was he who ate Kisaragi Eugene, then they will believe it. Anger shot through me. I clenched my teeth hard with indignation, and my eyes lit up with an unkind scarlet light. Take it alive? Amorpha. I was indignant, getting more and more angry at the course of their thoughts. The train of thought of these stupid mortals. It seems that they perceive me as some kind of wild animal from the most ordinary planet. A hostile space creature can bite the neck of its enemy, I argued indignantly, emitting steam from its mouth, even if its limbs are cut off and only one head remains. Such is the amorphous. I will fight. I opened my mouth and let out a cry of indignation, baring my sharp teeth. I'll show you how reckless and stupid the idea of taking an amorpha alive is. Especially with a small number of soldiers. I raised my paws up, assuming the stance of a monster ready for anything. Show these mortals your superiority. And in the ventilation shaft. I use all possible means. And I'll show you what hell looks like in space. I rested my paws on the floor and let out a kind of signal. Similar to what I used to emit with my mustache, I have done the same at the moment. It's not for nothing that I built a nest in this junction of pipes that run around the entire perimeter of the ship. Connection. Many bands of energy dispersed from me in different directions immediately. They followed like bright red-black arrows, but visible only to my eye and no one else. The ship's personnel began to explore the ship, starting with the search of compartments and ending with tracking the location and movement of enemies. It was as if I saw with my own eyes directly. Two figures of men follow along the corridor. A woman from the laboratory is heading towards them. If we assume that a ship floating in space is a living being, then I am no different from a parasite in the brain. My red and black communication arrows envelop the entire ship. I know everything and I don't have a gap in this snare. I don't have blind spots. After all, I know what's going on the ship, as well as its owners. The captain and department heads gather on the bridge. A spacious room with a lot of equipment. 3 people walk around the perimeter, studying something through a tablet in their hands. 2 in the corners of the room drive some information into computers. Since Arnold is also here, he must be taking command. Armed soldiers also started moving. A group of 3 men in snow-white protective clothing are heading through the tunnel. Most likely, these are those who were ordered to study the ventilation shafts. As expected, the group split up. We have decided on the main points of the plan. I was thinking, still studying the movement of people on the ship. I will deal with everything else along the way, depending on the movement of the enemy and his weapons. I closed my jaws and lowered my head. Well, now we can go meet the guests. A1 is in position. It was heard in the speaker. Team A starts the operation. The screen reflects the windows from the surveillance cameras, as well as in one of the windows, a plan of ventilation shafts with tracking of the fighters sent there. This is the operations room. The brunette with the gathered hair on the back of his head spoke. He tracks the movement of the fighters in the mine, as well as whether any danger is approaching by the cameras, in order to immediately warn them in time. B1. In position. The B1 command starts the operation. B1, the connection is bad. Study everything carefully. From the computer screen, the same picture is displayed on a huge screen, which is also watched by the ship's captain and the head of the security department among the standing people. This. B1. Accepted. If you see anything suspicious in the distance, report immediately. Most likely, the dark-haired man with a scar thought, also watching what was happening. Lady Kisaragi was killed by a monster. Initially, I had to deal with its elimination. The plan remains unchanged, but the number of variables should be reduced as much as possible. The head of the crisis management department decided and immediately frowned. We can't let anything happen before Mr. Eugene arrives. The monster. You will die before today is over. The dark-haired man with the scar was thinking, not taking his eyes off the screen. A1, there is a fork ahead, head to the right. They spoke the hint into the microphone again. B1, you also have a fork ahead, move to the right. V3. The connection is not very good. The guy with his hair in a ponytail spoke again. Check it out and move on. Accepted. We will contact you as soon as we finish all the work. The route is difficult, the head of the crisis management department said aloud. Let them move cautiously. This is the operations room. The guy immediately started talking into the equipment. Take your time, search carefully. The dark-haired man with a scar grunted, something strained him in what he saw. In V3, the camera shows the same thing. Let him check it out. Immediately, he instructed the dispatcher to hand over to the armed personnel. I'm listening. A short reply immediately followed. Q3, check the camera. The boy immediately passed the instructions into the microphone. But there was only silence in response. This is the operations room. V3, I repeat. Check the camera. It's all right. It came from the other end, but the visibility of the camera was quite murky. B2, unite with B3. The guy with the ponytail on the back of his head immediately gave instructions behind you and continue moving. B2, accepted. Immediately there was an answer on the other end. B1 remained standing in place. B2 went straight to B3, while B3 was supposedly on the move. B2 was approaching B3 at an accelerated rate. Sensors showed that B3 and B2 collided with each other, which is what the commanders wanted. But before they could give instructions or listen to the report, a heart-rending human scream filled the room, plunging the captain, the head of the medical team and the head of the crisis management department into horror. The heart-rending scream continued, so loudly, so sharply and for a long time, already breaking into a wheeze. B2. The boy at the control panel immediately exclaimed. What happened? It's here. There was an immediate response. It only again managed to be heard the same way. But it was interrupted again by a terrifying scream. Arnold listened to this in silence, but only gritted his teeth with indignation at what was happening. V3, the connection with B2 is lost. The boy exclaimed into the microphone again. Report the situation. It dragged B2 away. There was a response, and the camera screens rippled from the loss of signal. There is nothing on the screen, please provide details. Due to the sudden attack, it is impossible to check the area. There was a response to the request. The head of the technical team and the head of the security department stood arriving in horror and only gasped for air, like fish thrown on dry land. Hey, signalman. They exclaimed immediately, moving away a little from the shock. What's going on there? Well. The guy with the ponytail stuttered and jumped on the spot from suddenness. Why are you did he manage everything so quickly? A soldier in reinforced equipment could not answer, thoughts swarmed in the head of a brunette with a scar, driving him more and more into horror as he was attacked. Even for experienced killers, it's not easy to cope with this. He clenched his fists until they crunched, not stopping to think about what had happened. What had happened filled his head. I thought it was a wild animal, but how wrong I was. It's more agile than I thought. Signalman, tell everyone. The head of the crisis management department immediately exclaimed. To open fire in case of the slightest movement. Let B1 unite with B3, find B2 and report on the situation. Yes, the head of the department. The signalman immediately responded. This is the operations room. V3, the signalman said again, temporarily stop looking for B2 and unite with B1. Accepted. There was an immediate response. B1 has teamed up with V3 and we are starting to search for B2. The soldiers reported again. Accepted, B1. The signalman immediately replied. The brunette with the scar immediately began to think what could happen at such a pace and what it would be better to do as soon as possible because not only others on the ship, he could also become a potential victim. If this continues, everyone will die. B1 was standing still while B3 was speeding towards him. It's B1, I hear something. A voice rang out. This is the operational room. The signalman immediately responded, what kind of sound do you hear? I'm not sure, but something is definitely coming. There was a reply, and his camera was displayed on the screen. Everyone immediately tensed up and did not take their eyes off the screen. It is not possible to set a goal because of the fork. The answer started from the other end, but suddenly the voice stopped. B1 corrects. The voice came again from the other end. Sound source V3. The dark-haired man with the scar immediately sighed contentedly. I hear the voice of V3. They said it again from the other end of the wire. Ugh. The signalman sighed with relief. This is the operations room. B1, report back when you merge with V3. But there was only silence in response. B1? The signalman spoke again. Only one of the walls of the ventilation shaft was visible on the screen. V3 was dragged away by the enemy. The silence was broken again by a voice from the other end of the connection. What? The head of the crisis management department immediately exclaimed. And those present in the room were again seized with horror. Step. Another step. One more. This is the head of the department. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke, snatching the headphones and microphone from the signalman. Report the situation. It all happened so fast. There was an answer. That I couldn't see anything. Fuck. Arnold swore, outraged by what was happening. He pressed the headphones harder to his ears, and wreaths of anger appeared on his forehead. He's right under your nose, and you don't see him? He exclaimed angrily immediately in response. Sorry. It sounded on the other end. The signalman and the head of the medical team turned in his direction. Damn. The head of the crisis management department swore and threw the headphones on the table. No, it can't be. He shouted in his mind, breathing fast, as if without the opportunity to breathe deeply. Maybe it was always there, and we didn't notice? It slowly reached the man. At the same time, it did not get on cameras B1 and B3. The dark-haired man with the scar was thinking, and his face was covered with perspiration. It's impossible for a monster to intentionally avoid shooting. He didn't say anything out loud, but the signalman was afraid to touch him or say something. No, wait a minute. Suddenly, the head of the crisis management department came to light. He took the headphones from the table quite calmly. I put them on my head, setting up a stray wave. This is the head of the department. He spoke, holding the earpiece with a microphone. B1, please state your full name. He spoke quite calmly. What? There was an answer from the other end of the wire. I repeat. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke calmly again, which made the captain who was standing next to him tense up at that time. He didn't understand what was going on and what Arnold was chazzing. B1, identify yourself now. Oops. There was almost not the same voice that once before. He distorted a little, thereby shocking Arnold. Gotcha? His guess was correct. One of the screens was covered with cobwebs from the fact that the eye of video surveillance was broken. And on top of the broken lens lay a four-fingered paw of a purple hue. Oh. The head of the security department and the head of the medical team stood with their mouths open and could not say anything out of horror. They almost became afraid to breathe. The screen immediately hissed and became covered with small ripples from the lack of a signal. This also scared the head of the technical team, which caused him to fall to the floor. This is A1. It sounded in the headphones. But the head of the crisis management department arrived in severe shock, covered with perspiration and afraid to say anything. It was as if he had swallowed his tongue from the shock he had experienced. What the hell is going on? One of the soldiers exclaimed again. This is A1, please answer. The voice rang out again. The brunette with the scar did not waste time for a long time, clenched his teeth with anger. The B team is finished, I thought, destroying one of the surveillance cameras. I got a tip from number 26 and disabled the means of communication with the help of waves. I reasoned while in the ventilation shaft, smeared in the blood of my victims. In front of me there are 3 bodies in a pile with their heads cut off or rather torn off. Because of these waves, V3, who was walking behind, heard interference. He sat down and, taking off his protective helmet, immediately began to examine it for the cause of the breakdown. I eliminated the soldier who was repairing the equipment, my sting immediately stabbed into his neck, and green stripes swelled under the skin, spreading across his face. With the help of the new combined skill poison glands. After that, everything went like clockwork. Thanks to them, I ate heartily. Continuing to recall the course of my actions, I devoured one by one the heads of my fallen victims. Next in line is the A-team, I thought, and immediately grinned, anticipating what was coming. Look where they are. I sent the pulse waves again in order to track my victim and think over the course of action. Waves of turquoise hue immediately filled the ventilation shafts, as if probing everything in search of the object I was looking for. Found. I immediately exclaimed mentally, seeing a group of soldiers walking in the palm of my hand. in full combat readiness. And no wonder. I thought and immediately ducked into a branch of the mine. Team B didn't know anything about me. However, now the enemy knows that I can imitate a human voice. I slowly but surely made my way through the mine, following my objects of observation. Is it possible to turn the current situation in my direction? I made my way to the area I needed and immediately took up a position, looking around the corner to see if my potential victims appeared on the horizon. There is a fork on the way from where the A-team will appear. They'll be here soon. I was thinking, hiding. They say knowledge is power, is it really so? I thought and grinned, watching the terrain from around the corner. Incomplete knowledge can be poison. Turning on a bright small flashlight built into the helmet, the soldier headed into the depths of the ventilation shafts. This is A1, he immediately began to report into the microphone that is built into the helmet. In his hands he still held a weapon ready and did not particularly distract from the terrain in front of him, ahead of the fork. We keep to the right side. This is an operational room, feedback was heard in the dynamics with minimal interference, accepted. This is the head of the department, it was heard again in the speaker from the end of the connection that was in the operational room, I will repeat once again. It imitates a human voice. Two soldiers walk in front of a small group, holding a gun at the ready, while the third goes behind their backs, facing backwards, in order to protect their rear if anything. If you hear a human voice, a serious tone was heard again in the speaker, immediately open fire. Hey. I'm here. I shouted, again imitating one of the victims that I had recently managed to absorb. Help. The soldier who was walking in front of the group did not lose his head and gave a clear order without even blinking. Enemy. Open fire. Less than a second later, bright green flashes of fire immediately headed in my direction deep into the ventilation hole, which reflected their glow. I didn't waste any time and immediately rushed away from such pressure. I didn't really want to become a colander in the prime of my life. Stop. Once again, one of the soldiers in the front row gave an order clearly and loudly and raised his right hand so that he could be understood by the one behind him. The second one was covered with perspiration either from excitement or he caught something out of the corner of his eye or the temperature in the ventilation shaft was rising. This is the operations room. It was heard in the speaker when the soldiers continued their movement through the tunnel again, looking around the same way. Set the enemy status. This is A1, accepted. The commander of the team spoke into the microphone. They started walking almost one after the other, holding their weapons at the ready, and their rear was open. The rest of you stay in your positions and cover A1. It was heard in the speakers of the other fighters of the present group. Accepted. The soldier who has to protect the rear, as it were, answered. But here he stands with his back to me, and I calmly watch him almost closely. What stupid people, though. I immediately pulled my paws towards the unsuspecting fighter. Poor, trembling like a leaf in the wind in autumn weather. And these are soldiers? And this is the protection of the ship? How funny. I do not argue, we are all people. Oh, yes, I'm not. In the dynamics of another fighter on the general communication line, my victim's sigh and a loud scream at the top of his throat were heard. The man immediately turned back, still pointing the weapon forward. A3. It was immediately heard in the speaker over the general communication line. What happened? From behind. There was a cry of my victim already with a wheeze because of the blood that abruptly began to flow into his throat. The enemy is behind. His voice was fading and there was a cough. The fighter who turned around in time in our direction was immediately taken aback when he saw me. A1. A2. Open fire. An order was immediately issued from the speaker. But in response, the fighters only mumbled. Wait. Stop it. The victim, whom I grabbed in order to use at best as a shield, is on his knees in front of me and is shaking very much from the overflowing horror. He took A3 hostage. Exclaimed one of the fighters who joined the present in front of me. If we open fire, we can injure A3. While they were hesitating, I looked out from behind the half-dead victim, threatening her with my sting, from which a drop of poison was dripping and waiting for my moment in this whole story. Damn it. Open fire. They shouted the order into the microphone again. A1. Orders from the speaker began to be heard again in raised tones. Shoot to kill. This is an order. This is A1. The fighter stuttered and reluctantly raised his gun up. I'm doing it. A bunch of bright green flashes of the beam immediately flew in my direction. Having thrown a human shield that I no longer needed and did not play any role, I ran away from these problems that were so eager to kill me. The discharges of their weapons casually, but still touched the surface of my skin, causing small scratches, but over and over again, small drops of my poisonous blood immediately began to scatter in different directions. As soon as I ran out to the fork, without thinking twice, I immediately dived into one of the turns, hiding from their direct and deadly fire. May they be empty to these knackers. This is A2. I report, the fighter is wounded. One of the fighters immediately began to report into the microphone that they shot at me while I was taking my paws away from the crime scene, burning the ventilation passage behind me every now and then. Small drops of blood made tiny holes in the metal surface. I repeat. A fighter is wounded. A2 spoke into the microphone again. Continue the pursuit. It was heard at the other end of the escort from the operational room. We have to catch him. The commander did not intend to retreat for a second, even at the cost of the soldiers' lives. It is better to sacrifice a little blood than your own. The soldier who was once my pseudo-shield was certainly not a tenant. He was shaking like he was having an epileptic fit. Blood was leaking out of the helmet, and something that looked like flesh began to seep through the ventilation holes in the suit. Damn. One of the soldiers swore, still unwilling to leave his colleague in trouble. Come to your senses. He did not let up, not losing hope that something that lies in front of him can still be saved. A3 is in shock. Exclaimed the second soldier, who was immediately squatting next to him. We inject. The injection has been administered. A mechanical voice rang out from the light blue screen that is on the half-corpse's arm. The screen is built into the mechanism of the suit that they are wearing. My victim exhaled and the body went limp, although her appearance did not inspire anything good, especially the flesh that formed almost minced meat, which protruded beyond the helmet. This is A1. The fighter spoke into the microphone. A3, an injection has been administered. We will continue the mission. This is the operations room. Immediately came from the speaker. Accepted. Damn monster. Suddenly someone cursed on the general communication stream. Catch him and tear him to pieces. It seems that one of the soldiers suddenly noticed a burned hole, he is also wounded. The green slime was still making a barely perceptible hiss, continuing to absorb the metal. It's crazy. The second soldier was taken aback when he saw it with his own eyes. Acidic blood. I have no idea what kind of monster it could be. They began to move slowly to the fork, and after squatting, one of them looked out in order to inspect the surrounding area and not to run into the enemy suddenly. Too narrow. One of them spoke, also examining the surroundings closest to them. What'll we do? Another asked while they were watching the course of the path made of drops of my blood. Go on. The answer to the question was immediately heard. This is A1. The soldier spoke into the microphone, reporting to his superiors. We ask for permission to use the special mode to effectively suppress the enemy. He listened to the silence on the other end of the line, and his face was covered with perspiration. This is the head of the department. Finally, an answer came from the operational room. You can use it. One of the soldiers on the screen of his device highlighted the scheme of the ventilation passage, which is right in front of them. The program flashed something, and he immediately pressed the activation key. Suddenly something entered their body. The pupil immediately shrank, and bright stripes from four sides passed to it, passing along the surface of the white. It was as if some liquid was gathering in the center. At the moment to the iris of the class. The soldier immediately twisted and fell on all fours, choking with a choking cough. The body was shivering and filled with unbearable pain, which made the fighter seem to cling to the metal coating, trying to hold on and not fall completely. To subdue, not to become broken. He managed to subdue the splash of foreign matter, and his fingers sank into the metal, as if into soft oil, drawing stripes and leaving grooves. I'm going to kill the damn bastard. The soldier uttered with wild aggression, picking up a machine gun and venting his anger with a blow to the floor. I'll be the first. Said the second, heading forward in order to get to my skin. Soon one of the soldiers sat down a little. He noticed clouds of steam rising up not far from him. There was also a green muck that made a hiss. After waiting a bit, he came closer and looked into the blood-burned hole in order to determine where I had escaped from them. This is A1. The soldier who had just come up behind him immediately began to report. A large hole was noticed in the ventilation shaft. There are no other traces. Most likely, A1 said, continuing his report, still examining the hole I burned, it went down into the corridor. This is the operations room. Accepted. They were immediately answered. We'll search the corridor, report the exact location. C06, next to the agricultural. The soldier answered while I was watching them from behind. These boobies bought into my trick. I immediately pushed off hard with my hind legs and rushed towards them. These bastards managed to turn around with their weapons in my direction. And the bright green shots from their guns immediately flew in my direction, but I spat on them. If you don't get rid of the problem now, then it can grow to a much larger scale. Trying to deftly squirm and avoid an accurate hit on me, I was getting closer to the victim every second, which I had already noticed and aimed at. The man only had time to sigh when he realized that the case smelled of kerosene. Having overtaken this tin can, I immediately decided to open it and, clutching the helmet on his head with my paw, immediately began to pull away sharply. Holding the helmet that is attached to the head of my victim, I struck a strong blow from which this bag of meat immediately sprayed blood in different directions. I didn't open the tin can, but I made it clear that it was reserved by me. Without giving up on my plan, I threw his head on the floor with a powerful blow, which caused the body to immediately follow. From the blow in which I put all my strength, the helmet immediately shattered into pieces in different directions. It is unlikely that the skull could survive, although who knows. An animal instinct seemed to rush over the second soldier. The irises of the eyes again became quite small, along with the pupils, and the veins on the face swelled and began to pulsate immediately. Without hesitating for long, he immediately opened a powerful fire to defeat, firing shots without interruption. But I did not lose the precious time that had been up to that moment and immediately closed the body of a human victim already immobilized. The victim became a sieve, but that's not how I get damage. Having clouded his vigilance, which was covered by the rage that was boiling in the soldier, I, hiding behind a human sacrifice, slowly moved closer to the distraught. As soon as he slowed down a little and there was a slight lull, my sting immediately jerked in his direction. But the soldier was not so stupid either. He immediately beat off my sting with a powerful blow. I was taken aback by this turn of events, and the man immediately rushed at me with his fists with one obsession to damage me. Die. He growled and immediately loomed over me, raising his hand for a powerful punch, while I was still sitting over the corpse of the last fighter. His fist got acquainted with the surface of the ventilation shaft, but not with my body. I deftly emerged from under him and immediately rushed away, trying to leave this place and again wait for the moment I needed to win. I saw the passage to the top and immediately tried to climb into it with minimal injuries as the soldier grabbed his weapon again and immediately opened fire in my direction, trying to kill me. But it didn't work out. He fell to his knees and immediately screamed, absorbed in the wild rage that he had been so diligently directing in my direction. Alas, but he's back with -1 fighter and certainly without my head and a lifeless corpse. With quick jumps and movements, I was running away from the battlefield, going further and further away from this furious can of minced meat. They are stronger, I reflected without slowing down, than I expected. In the game, I was able to cope with them, despite the special mode. I was thinking, remembering my past and the game developments that were then. I think we need to change the strategy. Now, no trick will work on A1. I summed up the results of this skirmish, scratching my temple. Then the best option would be. Oh, right. Suddenly, a light bulb lit up in my brain from an idea that immediately came into it. There's another way. I thought, thinking through all the nuances of this idea. In one of the ventilation shafts lies a human body in a blood-covered, no longer snow-white combat suit. He was still breathing, but very rarely and quite heavily. Not far from him is a weapon. The flashlight is still on his head. The body is shaking after the incident, and sweat has appeared on the face. Suddenly he noticed something out of the corner of his eye and immediately drew attention to it, glancing to the right. His breathing immediately increased significantly as soon as he saw my head. I was peeking around the bend in order to check out the area. He immediately started shouting, although I was advancing quite slowly and smoothly. It can be seen that my kind eyes and smile did not inspire confidence. This is exactly the case in them. I found something to be afraid of. How this piglet screams for quite a long time. It didn't work out slowly. I immediately rushed in his direction so that either extra witnesses or that brutalized A1 would not run to his call. I stopped almost a millimeter away from him. Emitting steam, I looked my victim straight in the eyes and one of my paws hovered in the air ready to jerk. My victim was lying flat and could not move while experiencing wild fear and crying incessantly. I admired it and ruled, dreaming to devour it as soon as possible. I knocked him to the floor, from which he coughed, but still obeyed without movement. One powerful and sharp blow to the chest through their canning protection, and splashes of brown blood immediately burst out of the body. I abruptly pulled my paw out of the hole I had formed, and rivers of blood immediately seemed to follow it, and the corpse itself could not stop the flow of blood that escaped from its mouth. Here they are, streams of predator wine with its inherent smell of iron and spreading heat. I sat quietly absorbing the still warm meat of my open canned food, filling my stomach after a long and difficult skirmish. I was sitting over my victim, taking out his insides and savoring every bite, filling up with strength for the upcoming fight, and the brown goo spread on the floor and surrounded us. Furthermore, I think that's enough. It flashed through my head while I was licking the remnants from my face, so to speak. In front of me lay an already opened scarlet tin can without its meat contents, only with bones. This will let them know, I decided, that A3 was attacked from the other side. Grinning, I returned the location of the suit to its original appearance, putting an empty helmet on top of it. I noticed the camera that is usually attached to the suits of all soldiers and immediately swung my paw. In the operations room, my body was visible on the big screen, and how I shamelessly destroyed their eye for omniscience, at the same time as if mocking all the work that they had done. A little more and the screen immediately rippled, losing the signal from the camera, which it destroyed. This is the operations room. It came from the speaker right there. The monster attacked A3. I repeat. The monster attacked. The soldier heard the noise and immediately rushed towards the sound, accelerating with every second. He hurried to the place he was looking for with all his might. Breathing became faster and soon it became difficult to breathe in the helmet from the accelerated rhythm and fear in anticipation of what he saw. Capillaries appeared on the whites of the eyes, like a mesh of thin red threads. A3. He exclaimed when he reached the desired area in the ventilation shaft. Are you okay? In front of his eyes lay the body of a fighter who had been injected not so long ago. The body lay lifeless, leaning against a wall of the ventilation shaft, like a broken doll, almost completely covered in blood. A3. Answer. The soldier said again, coming closer to his partner who was passed out. He immediately pulled his hand towards him, holding a weapon in the other. Damn. He cursed and took the hand of the man lying in front of him. He began to press something on the blue screen built into the suit of a man in a blackout. Take your medicine urgently. He said. Suddenly, with a sharp jerk, my tail burst out of the stomach of the lying man in the direction of the unsuspecting soldier who came. He stared dumbfounded at what was left of the soldier in front of him and couldn't even believe his eyes. He coughed and rolled his eyes. The irises of his eyes immediately shrank, and on his face bulging veins filled with the green liquid of the poison that I had just injected imparted in different directions. My sting smoothly disconnected and a viscous green liquid stretched from it to the wound. The soldier was knocked over on his back, and he immediately began to choke on his own blood, which also sprayed out of his throat outside the suit. He tried to greedily grab the air that was so lacking and automatically tried to grab his throat, trying to help. While he, trembling, turned over on his stomach and tried to stop the bleeding, I put one of my paws through the hole in the lying suit. Hey. The soldier stretched out in surprise, looking back in my direction, and his flesh turned into a kind of minced meat. I barely, but still left the place where I was waiting for my victim. I was smeared all over in different shades of blood. I looked at this frightened rabbit who had fallen so naively into the snares I had set. I straightened up and looked down at him menacingly, my eyes flashing, covered in the blood of his already dead friends. Hey. The soldier shouted, trying to run away from me. But what a naive bug he is. It's so funny to watch him. Shaking, spitting minced meat, not enough to shout mommy to complete the picture. I deftly grabbed his head with one paw, the other grabbed his neck. Well, shall we twist the light bulbs? He was even more scared and sprayed blood through the hole of the helmet. I opened this tin can, freeing the soldier's head from these metal vises. Why are you crying? You probably almost suffocated there. Oh, yes, you can't breathe enough before you die. Have a nice day. To me. Appetite. I said, flashing my eyes and enjoying his frozen horror on his face. Eyes dilated almost to the limit, a small pupil, tears flowing like a river, an open mouth. Here it is, a mute scream. I slowly but surely, as if savoring the moment, began to butcher my victim, and he seemed to lose consciousness from pain shock, and his eyes rolled up to the limit. I was enjoying the moment, and my head slowly began to detach from my body like rags. It wasn't worth much effort, but the crunching and slurping sound was like a beautiful melody of my victory. I opened my mouth, lifting his head up, and began to enjoy the delicious food. Not far from us lies the helmet of my victim, calmly illuminating my feast with a flashlight and covered with blood splashes. I wonder if they enjoy this movie by buying tickets to the front row? Let nothing be heard through the communicator, but I know they are afraid. Fuck. What's it? It spread through the operational room, and people immediately fell to the floor from shock. The visibility of the helmet camera is displayed on the full screen, which is facing in my direction while I'm eating another of their soldiers. Someone froze with a scream on his lips, someone began to vomit while squatting right there. Even the head of the technical team froze in a silent scream, not taking his eyes off what was happening on the screen. She'll kill us all. I heard loud screams of a brunette with a scar, also looking at what was happening on the screen and sweating. Spider webs stretched not only in the ventilation shaft. They're next in line. And so. I was thinking about the further plan of my actions. Where will the enemy come from this time? 6 were killed, there were still 90 soldiers and officers. Having received my message, they will mobilize all their forces. I thought as I made my way through the ventilation shafts. I know that there is no special equipment on this ship. One problem is the weapons. I was still thinking as I made my way through the metal ventilation shafts in a semi-bent state. If they arm themselves with plasma guns, I'm fucked. I was thinking about the worst outcome, changing my position to crawling on all fours. How narrow it is here. Plasma cannons are weapons with high firepower used by the fleet during combat operations. A powerful flash of a green beam aimed at one of the military trucks and incinerates it immediately. Most often they are used to destroy enemy ships or tanks. However, the guns are so big and heavy that they cannot be used alone. A huge powerful weapon that can be lifted and held by at least 2 people. But there is a lighter, more expensive weapon. The handle fits in the palm of one person and does not require the support of a partner. In addition, each megacorp unit is equipped with one plasma launcher. A man in a uniform with powerful armor holds a huge weapon that barely fits on his shoulder and releases a powerful jet of a green-tinged laser. I doubt there is anything like that here. I grunted without slowing down my speed. Suddenly I reached one of the grills of the ventilation shaft and catching someone's noise, I immediately stopped and decided to listen. The soldiers are moving into the agricultural compartment. I assumed, having studied their direction. They were in a uniform of a different color and headed in an even formation. They had a black-tinged uniform with white pseudo-jackets on their backs. They think that I will sit in one place. I decided very well and continued on my way. This is my chance. While everyone is busy looking for me, I immediately quickened my pace. I will visit the management. If the leadership positions are thinned out, then there will be no one to control the ship. Besides, we need to eliminate Arnold. He is a threat to my existence. Head of the Crisis Management Department. A painfully familiar voice exclaimed. Where did this monster come from? Besides, what kind of monster is this? I caught up with the ventilation outlet I needed, and I hope I managed to get to the beginning of an interesting performance. The head of the logistics department was transporting unknown creatures on a ship. The man in the blue uniform explained. I guess this is one of them. How can you say that? The ship's captain, impressed by what had happened, did not let up. We even used enhanced equipment, but it didn't help anything. The captain persisted while I watched him closely. Oh, so this is also one of the heads of the department. I thought. Enhanced equipment is a lifeline in space. I grinned at what I heard, worth a lot of money. Trying to cut costs, they put an end to their lives. If we had normal equipment, this would not have happened. A dark-haired man in a blue uniform spoke, and the captain immediately clenched his jaws with anger. You made a mistake. The enemy is dangerous and very smart, said the dark-haired man with a scar. Besides, we now know that it can imitate human speech. And you're just talking about it now? The captain of the ship did not give up his positions. Data collection is of paramount importance. The head of the Crisis Management Department spoke quite calmly. All actions are based on known information. But the captain said in response to the interlocutor's argument. All this was observed by the head of the technical team and the head of the security department without much desire to get into their squabble. I've already sent soldiers, the dark-haired man with the scars said, but I have a request. Which one? The captain asked, gritting his teeth in anger. Requesting permission to use a plasma launcher. Arnold spoke, which shocked the captain. What? The bald man was taken aback by what he heard. Are you crazy? The head of the security department immediately exclaimed. This weapon is designed to fight pirates. Head of the Crisis Management Department. The head of the technical team also exclaimed. We're on a ship. Let it be a former battleship. The skirmish continued, but to use something like this on board? If you are so eager to die, go into space alone. How much noise? The answer immediately followed. Apparently, they really have weapons, I thought, without distracting myself from their friendly conversation in quotation marks. The enemies are confused, I decided, and launched a turquoise tinge pulse in order to explore the area, the perfect moment to catch prey. Arnold is too far away, I decided, studying their location and planning my attack. Closest to me. I stretched out everything, also studying with the help of an impulse. This guy. A man with a light color of hair slicked back with gel, looked at something in fright and was covered in sweat. Most likely, he did not take his attention off the digital screen in the operating room. Senior researcher Wei. I remembered his data. The one who torments number 26 every day. Then I'll focus on him. I decided anyway. I was planning to kill him someday anyway, I thought, and raised my paw back, preparing for an attack. I sharply hit the ventilation grate with my paw and caught on it. Thus, I created a loud sound and attracted attention to myself. This sound was instantly heard by the brunette with the scar and immediately turned around at the noise I created. The grate immediately flew to the side and I fell out of the ventilation shaft with my mouth open, ready to absorb the victim I had chosen, but the man froze on the spot when he saw me. My mouth hovered over a frightened man frozen with a mask of horror on his face. A couple of millimeters away from my rather sharp teeth. I bit into his face instantly as if I had been starving for months, and with a loud slurping began to absorb food, spraying blood on the floor surface and scattering pieces of flesh in different directions. I knocked this man over on his back. Furthermore, I chewed out half of my face and a whole eyeball right in front of the head of the medical team and the head of the security department, who were frozen with horror. They couldn't move and just watched what was happening for a while, and I just drooled, mixed with the remnants of blood on the already present corpse. Not lingering on one victim for long and wasting time, I immediately rushed at the head of the medical team and the head of the technical team, while they ran away screaming, calling me a monster. The next one I clung to was the head of the security department. I immediately dug my sharp teeth into his right shoulder, thereby preventing him from moving on. After that, I pierced through the head of the medical team with my sharp sting. Blood immediately gushed out of the wound, splashing in different directions on the passing people of this ship. Save me. The fleeing workers were shouting. A girl with a square haircut, a brunette in a medical gown, was hurrying in front of me. Most likely, she was a lab worker, and a dark-haired guy in a black short-sleeve sweatshirt was also running next to her. They were horrified to see me and what I was doing at the moment. The body leaned forward. Blood immediately gushed from the back of his head, staining the leather upholstery of his seat. On the surrounding floor in this room lay a pile of corpses with their arms outstretched in different directions. Blood streams almost covered the entire floor, soaking into the pores of the tile. Suddenly I felt shots in the back. Someone opened fire on me, and short rays of a green shade bit into my skin. But since it was not the kind of weapon that would cause me damage, these shots only seemed to tickle me. I thought he was going to run away, flashed through my mind when I saw Arnold standing a meter away with a gun pointed in my direction. What is he doing? He doesn't even have enhanced equipment on him. I thought, examining it completely. I'm not afraid of such a gun, maybe he's sure of something? Thoughts raced through my head. While I was studying the situation, the brunette who was standing a meter away from me clenched his teeth from dissatisfaction with what was happening, still holding the gun as if he expected something. Well, if he wants to die. I decided, already thinking about how to deal with this person. Suddenly I was struck by lightning. Pictures of the future immediately began to appear in front of me like a videotape. Here's the first, he shoots me with this gun, which does me no harm. Picture 2, I still got angry and decided to take advantage of this moment. I pierce his body at chest level with my sting, thereby inflicting a fatal blow. Picture number 3, he shows me another weapon that he took out of his coat from somewhere, and it immediately comes to me, but it's too late that I fell into his trap. Into his cleverly placed snares. He fires a plasma pistol, and powerful charges of green fire reach my flesh. My head immediately shatters into many small pieces. That's the end of the game, as they say. I stand with my mouth open watching these pictures of the future that supposedly can happen. Most likely, this is a premonition of a predator or something similar. Psychic abilities, which I received during evolution. Fuck, I cursed right there in my mind. A plasma pistol. I learn from mistakes, but it's also better to learn from the future. Sweat immediately broke out on my face. I began to think about what I should do anyway. Expensive and light weapons with high destructive power. I stood and pondered at a distance from the object that was in a hurry to finish me off. If he hits me with that thing, I'm a dead man. I decided. Damn. Apparently he has something to do with the Eugene family. I decided, however, based on the information I had received before, while he was standing and did not make any movements. He sighed and immediately squinted, as if calculating whether that moment had come or not, in order to get his secret weapon that he had hidden. Have you noticed? He asked immediately and threw away the gun that he had used before. He pulled back his coat and took out what was hidden in the inside pocket. It really was the plasma pistol he had stashed away. Seeing his colleagues on the ship, the captain and the head of the technical team were immediately surprised. They didn't expect to see this weapon. It was a medium-sized black weapon with some kind of small flask, filled with something of a turquoise hue. Most likely it was a battery or some kind of charge. A plasma gun? The captain asked. Expensive weapons. The head of the technical team exclaimed, looking in our direction. I don't know what you are, but I have one suggestion. A brunette with a scar on his lip spoke while threatening, still already with a plasma cannon. A monster with many abilities. The head of the crisis management department grinned. You look like my master Saiyan Eugene. A shot was not long in coming from the weapon. And a green-tinged plasma beam immediately headed towards me. A bundle of energy of a bright green hue with thin threads of lightning along the course of the shot. Shot after shot rained down after me, while I immediately rushed away without wasting a single second. The shots missed, burning through the surface of the floor immediately, or objects that were unsuccessfully touched. This Arnold seemed to have broken loose, although if you look at it, he was as cold as a rock. We have gone through so many options, said the head of the caving management in crisis situations, stepping on my heels. Who can you be? He fired indiscriminately, leaving holes and molten iron in the equipment. The case is rubbish. I thought, hiding for a while in order to catch my breath. The last time I was so scared was in the cargo hold. The iron of the paneling was still dripping around me, and so far the floor was soaked only with someone else's blood. My thoughts were running chaotically in my head trying to come up with some way out. But there are always risks in the game and sometimes more than that. I decided to set myself up for the best outcome. As they say, it was not. And the winner has always been me, the amorphous one. It doesn't matter who gets in the way of history. I'll be greeting them, not Arnold. Bears, lions, wolves. Predators that we encounter in the media. They are portrayed as embodiments of terrifying violence. But this is not quite true. The bear is like a mountain, trying to suppress his aggressive gaze, while the tiger does not want to continue the quarrel and tries to run away from the scene of the skirmish. The real predator is a coward who avoids a fight, which he cannot do. Cowardly caution can be a hunter's factor. I remembered the carefree days of the past, when only a meter of computer connected me and this monster. Playing for Amorpha, I learned it by heart. No matter how strong the characteristics or information are, everything will fail if you are not careful. Suddenly, another charge of green plasma flew over my head almost a couple of millimeters away. He fell right on the exit door of this ill-fated operational room. Phew, one more moment and goodbye. And he's good. I snorted mentally and began to create turquoise-colored impulses. The heartbeat is stable. It was pretending that I was nervous a while ago. With the help of impulse, I decided to study the attacker in order to find at least some clues to further actions. Yes, it's still a pleasure to look at this gloating physiognomy. Didn't they tell you that guns are not toys for children? He looks like a child who is the only one in the sandbox who has a shovel, while others only have buckets. After analyzing me, he must have understood everything the other way around. He smells just like me. The smell of an experienced predator. Well, distraught. I again tried to sneak behind some building in order to catch my breath, exhaust him and think about everything. Another shot hit my hiding place, but not me. And this is oh so pleasing. The next blows melted the place of shelter, and I immediately began to run in search of another one. In fact, he only sees that I am running like a coward and feels his superiority, which overshadows his gaze. But if you open your eyes, it destroys the ship from the inside. For the sake of this, you can run, cowardly with your tail between your legs. Head of the department. The captain finally spoke up. Don't forget that this is the opera headquarters, be careful. The head of the technical team also began to give voice from his hiding place. I'm careful as it is. The head of the crisis management department only snorted, looking back at them. I wanted to take advantage of this and change my location. But it wasn't there. The brunette with the scar immediately noticed the movements and, sitting down on one knee, began his shooting again. That's a smart devil. Fortunately, I still managed to sneak through and overcome the open area without injury and his winning hits on my poor skin. Oh, you little rat. The head of the crisis management department gritted his teeth and immediately straightened up, standing up to his full height. This is a hoax. I thought, still probing everything with my impulse. This is the head of the department. Suddenly a dark-haired man with a scar spoke, addressing someone most likely by some connection. The monster attacked the operational headquarters on the bridge. All active troops are gathered here. A heavy burden. I thought when I heard that. You shot at me like you were going to kill me, but it was a test. It finally dawned on me what the devil with the scar was up to. He was stalling for time, protecting the captain and the head of the department. The soldiers can catch me at this rate. Huh, I grinned right there and bared my teeth. Were you trying to fool me? In any case, I thought, trying to look out and scout the situation, we need to finish this before the troops arrive. Suddenly I saw a bright red balloon with all sorts of indicators under one of the tables, and a wonderful idea came to me. This fire extinguisher. Very handy. I decided, trying to get it unnoticed. But so that he wouldn't even notice him out of the corner of his eye, and guess my plan. Tearing off the fuse so that my idea would not break, I took the fire extinguisher into service. I disconnected the ceiling mount to make it easier to hold the device and got ready for the next steps of implementing my plan. Without wasting a lot of time, I immediately directed the lampshade in the direction of my abuser and made the whole power in order to cover the visibility zone to the head of the crisis management department. What? Only a stupid question was heard in the clouds of smoke. Do you think this will stop us? The dark-haired man with the scar spoke, covering his mouth with his palm and preparing to shoot to kill. What a clever devil this is. The next shots almost hit me again, although I tried to crawl as unobtrusively and inaudibly as possible, closer to the floor. But the green sparks of the shots still flew almost nearby. The silence was replaced by the coughing of all those still alive present. I can't see anything. Someone shouted, trying to somehow see something and not lose control of the situation. What a bunch of nerds. The head of the crisis management department could not stand his indignation, watching as these idiots, instead of sitting quietly in shelters, began to wander thoughtlessly around the area of the operational room. You don't carry guns for decoration. He shouted again, deciding to use them somehow, since they were sticking out. Excuse me. Someone stammered. Where is he? The dark-haired man with the scar was indignant, clenching his teeth immediately with anger. Disappeared? Damn. He cursed and decided not to waste time in vain. Get the captain out of here. Did the pot work? I grinned when I heard his instructions. But this judgment is erroneous. I snorted, getting ready to eat my food, which I had already masterfully paralyzed with my poison. Well, it's time to eat. My victim was afraid of me, but she couldn't do anything and just let foam out of her mouth, not taking her eyes off me. Veins bulged on his face, already filled with my poison that was circulating through the bloodstream. I opened my mouth, showing my sharp teeth, and was already getting ready to eat delicious food. Scarlet blood immediately spurted out of the wound that had formed. Captain. Where is he? The blonde-haired man immediately exclaimed, holding his weapon at the ready and looking around. Here. Stuttering, they immediately gave a voice in response. It's not him. Suddenly someone exclaimed from a completely different direction, which confused the soldier. The captain is here. What? The soldier was taken aback, but did not move. Do not submit. It came from somewhere out of the fog. He's deliberately confusing us. By this time, I had already approached another soldier from behind and was ready to pounce at any moment. Yes. It was heard again among the fog. A brown-haired man is standing in front of me. He's shaking all over with fear and also looks around. But I didn't waste any time and immediately the scarlet blood spurted out again like a fountain, and I continued my dinner party. As you can see, I didn't call them all. Thank you for the offering, so be it. Don't believe him. It rang out again from somewhere unknown. He killed the head of the department. The blonde man was still standing in place, holding the gun tightly by the handle and trembling. The head of the navigation department? The boy stammered. Fuck yeah. It was heard again, but from the other side. Don't give in to him. A voice shouted, from which the soldier was immediately taken aback. He imitates the voice. His voice. I am the head of the navigation department. The same voice exclaimed without lowering its tone. Trust me. Damn. Wake up. It's a monster. Another voice was shouting. So many voices. Complete obscurity. It confused me so much that I was dizzy. Shoot him. Kill. There were screams here and there. The soldier sighed dejectedly, but still decided to do something at last and not stand and wait for his death. Oh my god. He shouted, unable to withstand the pressure, and immediately pulled the trigger, making a powerful shot into the unknown. Bam. It was heard at the place where the laser went into the fog from the shot. Said someone whose hand was hit by a soldier's shot and burned through clothes and partially skin. Damn it. The head of the crisis management department swore. A powerful shot of a soldier burned almost the sleeve of his clothes completely and inflicted a large-scale burn on the arm from the wrist to the shoulder, from which it immediately began to bleed. Suddenly, the brunette with the scar felt something and immediately turned around, guided by his premonition. "So you're there," he exclaimed and immediately fired in the direction where his premonition pointed him, despite the burn of the leading hand. Damn. This bastard still found me and shot me right, so to speak. This shot was sliding, but it still brought me pain. There is no need to hurry me, and I immediately began to look for a place where I could quickly hide from this patient. He made me angry. He's like a cockroach in the kitchen, hard to kill and infuriating. An idea came to my mind, and I decided to finally use what was given to me a long time ago. I returned the function of wings to my body and immediately straightened it out. Without thinking for a long time, without wasting time and accumulated rage, I immediately rushed in his direction by diving from the air, which immediately puzzled him, as he did not know about my trump cards up his sleeve. A moment later, I finally blew off the head of this annoying cockroach that was spoiling all my plans. Blood immediately splashed out in a scarlet fountain, and the body lost control and began to fall on its back, releasing its weapon from its tenacious grip. That's all. In this fight, it was already predetermined who would emerge victorious. And of course from the very beginning it was me and no one else. "Hey, assholes," the captain exclaimed, seeing the outcome of the incident. He was beside himself with this and was ready to take off 3 skins from each person present. It is understandable, there is a threat to his life on the ship, which can at any moment also take off his head sooner or later. "What the fuck are you doing here?" He was still indignant, saying in the face of the soldiers who arrived. "Excuse me." They stammered in response, holding a weapon, while on the floor one of the workers cannot restrain the urge to vomit. Not surprising. Who could hold back if not far from you lies a corpse with leaked brains in a pool of their own blood. God. The captain of the ship exclaimed again. "Get busy immediately." "So?" someone said, approaching the captain behind his back. "Captain," said a man who came closer, "we have finished identifying the victims." "Acting head of the medical team?" The captain was surprised, turning to the voice. "Are there any survivors?" The captain immediately asked, hoping to the last for the slightest better outcome. "No, everyone died." A brunette in a snow-white robe spoke, except for the acting head of the research group. "What?" the captain immediately exclaimed upon hearing the news. "Senior researcher Wei is not dead?" Large transparent flasks with some unknown liquid inside which floats a body without consciousness and without clothes. The only thing he was wearing was a mask for oxygen intake. A multitude of intertwining hoses, tubes and wires of black color kept the capsule in working condition. "Yes, he's been taken to the recovery room." A man in a bathrobe spoke. Fortunately, he was immune to the monster's neurotoxin. Part of the hair came off the man's skull. Half of the face consisted of corroded body tissue and had a burgundy hue. A lot of scars on his face, as if the veins on his face had been eaten out or torn out, which he had been deprived of. One eye left its home, and only the tissue of the eye socket remained without protein. The other eye is tightly compressed and also marred by smaller scars. A lot of bluish areas on the face. Where the larynx is also burned tissue. But he received irreversible damage to the organs of vision, smell and taste. He will have to breathe through a tube for the rest of his life. The brunette spoke, to which the captain only remained silent. But the next sentence of the opponent in the conversation struck him very much, and he immediately looked up at the one who said it. "Why don't we surrender to the space dogs? All these people want to live their own lives." The captain immediately exclaimed, and sweat immediately appeared on the brunette's face, and he looked away. "Down with useless conversations," the captain snorted and abruptly turned away. "Do your job." The man in the bathrobe also jerked from his seat and hurried after the manager, trying to keep up with every step. Damn. The ship's captain cursed inwardly. How many people died? He gritted his teeth in anger while the soldiers packed the corpses into bags. Heads of research, technical, medical, supply department, navigation and crisis management group. They all died. The captain was indignant to himself because of what had happened. If we fight pirates like this, we will never survive. Damn it. The captain of the ship cursed in his mind, standing in his place. Maybe I should drop everything and run away? Eh? One of the soldiers exclaimed when he saw something, which surprised him immediately. What kind of gun is that? The soldier exclaimed and immediately pulled the captain's attention out of his thoughts. The captain immediately turned his head towards the soldiers, and one of them immediately explained to the surprised one. It looks like a team leader's weapon. Hey! The captain exclaimed immediately, seeing a plasma pistol in the soldier's hands. Bring it here. The other soldier was sitting next to him and was still packing the body, which once could still speak of its own volition. Take. The soldier spoke and handed the captain a gun, which he had seen in the hands of the head of the crisis management department not so long ago. The energy charge is 60%. The captain began to reflect, studying the weapon in his hands. It's a little cracked, but it's good for self-defense. I'll have to take care of myself. He thought, looking at the small grid of cracks diverging on the charge bulb. The monster is alive and walking around the ship somewhere, the captain mused, leaving the operational room. 2 days later, a meeting with the pirates. I do not know what to do next. Most of the bumps at the helm have been eliminated. I thought until one of the bubbles burst and immediately released a dark green gas. The green liquid darkened and began to drain from the walls, and the bubbles burst and released dark green gas into the air. Even if the security system reports a problem, it will take time to process it. I was thinking, being in the center of my nest. I can ignore Captain Yu Sung. It's finally time to expand the nest. I thought and looked up into the darkness among the tangle of pipes. I currently have 3 nests in cryocomers, I reasoned, so I can choose 2 new ones. Catering is in the first place. I reasoned, remembering their dining room. A spacious room with long tables and lots of chairs. Food is the most important thing for survival. You can spoil the food and block the enemy's supply stocks. Next is the military equipment warehouse, where plasma installations are stored. I remembered a powerful weapon with a lot of test tubes in a circle, fixed almost in the middle of the room on powerful supports. This weapon can kill me, so I need to act right now. Another goal is the laboratory. There are a large number of genetic samples and ionium. In a row against the wall there are many small flasks with different entities. In the middle of the room is a large glass flask with a creature with long blue tentacles and a bone shell, as if it were a huge alien mollusk. However, the problem is that the probability of obtaining characteristics using a sample is less than 10%. Only with the help of ionium can you use the power of an individual and thereby prepare for pirates or possible enemies. I will place the nests in the catering and laboratory. We need to steal a plasma installation and use it. I decided all the same and immediately rushed to the place from which I decided to start. I didn't plan this initially, but what Arnold said continued to torment me. I thought as I made my way through the ventilation shafts. I do not know who Shihin Eugene is, who he serves, but he may be in cahoots with pirates. There is nothing scarier than an unknown enemy, I still thought as I moved towards the X spot. It's worth exploring more. Hi. Suddenly I heard the voice of a pink ball with an antenna and immediately stopped. Number 26, you seem to be in a good mood. Was there a dose experiment today? I asked immediately, looking out from around the corner. I immediately hissed, conveying my message to the creature. You seem to be in a good mood? Yes. It doesn't hurt. The bubble exclaimed in response. If you think about it, I immediately began to think, can't we experiment in the current situation? They hide in their rooms. Why not be a little bolder? Nevertheless, I finally decided and moved forward. Suddenly, 3 bright scarlet lights lit up on the ceiling of the ventilation shaft. There was a ringing sound, and the rays immediately blocked my way further down the ventilation shaft. The bubble immediately tensed. Apparently he also heard this ringing. What are you doing? He immediately asked. Wait, I hissed back at him, not taking my eyes off the scarlet lights. The bubble only looked puzzled again in response. I waited for about half an hour, I thought, not taking my eyes off. But no one came. This clarifies the situation. I was thinking. You will no longer need to move with bated breath. I decided and immediately swung one of my paws. I knocked out the ventilation grate with a powerful blow and immediately hung in the room. Long time no see, uttering, making a hiss and turning his gaze towards the pink bubble in the flask from which there is a bunch of connected wires after he jumped out of the ventilation hatch. Yes. My little friend issued his voice in the form of an impulse. The color of your body says that you look healthy. I began to reason, studying my girlfriend. But if you stay here, you'll starve to death. Still, I came to a sad conclusion, not taking my eyes off the bubble. Take you with me? Nevertheless, I decided to ask this question and thereby make life easier for both her and myself. I wouldn't get used to it here, they wouldn't decide what to blackmail me with, because sooner or later they can raise all the cameras. Due to the characteristics of the bubble amoeba, it is not particularly picky about food and is immune to toxicity. The bubble seemed to have grown handles, she happily raised them in agreement with my thoughts. Therefore, you can leave it in the nest or take it with you. Do you want to leave here? I hissed, turning immediately to her and spread my short arms. Get out? Where to? The bubble was puzzled, as if not taking his eyes off me. Get out of the lab, I hissed back at her right there. Yes. I want to. The bubble exclaimed joyfully right there. Be careful, I hissed at her and immediately stood on all my limbs, choosing the right angle. Yes. The bubble immediately exclaimed in response to me. I quickly jerked towards the glass bulb headfirst in order to punch a hole in it. The glass wall of the flask could not withstand a powerful blow, and I immediately grabbed the desired object in my strong arms, for which I came to this ill-fated place. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The bubble amoeba rejoiced and immediately climbed onto my shoulder. She was so happy about what had happened, as if she was in a hurry to kiss me. Wait, I hissed back and lowered her to the floor right there. Where are you going? The bubble amoeba was surprised as soon as I began to move away from it, throwing it on the floor. I'll make a nest, he said in response, and began to inspect the area in order to understand how to do better. Having found the right place, I tried to collect the right amount of liquid and immediately opened my mouth and released this viscous substance. I covered every centimeter of the angle I chose, and the slurry kept flowing down from the walls and stuck, forming a network of woven ropes. They sometimes swelled and seemed to be covered with either large or not very large bubbles around the perimeter of the ropes. The bubbles swelled to their maximum size and immediately burst, releasing a dark green gas that is a not very pleasant smell for people. Now no one will be able to use the laboratory for its intended purpose. I thought, studying the painstaking work I had done. The ceiling, the walls, almost everything was covered with ropes of my viscous slurry that I fixed in this place. I'm hungry. I decided and immediately broke one of the flasks, grabbed the contents. It was nothing but a brain with eyes attached to it on thin ropes of vessels. Wow, it was blue-eyed. Cute. This living brain is tasteless. I thought, eating not the first brain out of a flask. It's like opening canned food. Instead of enjoying the taste, I'll have to think about the nutrients. I kept thinking, devouring the other inhabitants of the flasks, while the bubble amoeba was absorbing something on the floor. She eats well. I decided, watching her devour the leftovers, almost glowing with happiness. Suddenly, my premonition distracted me from eating and I immediately paused, listening to my premonition. They're coming to us. I immediately realized and immediately began to look around, deciding what to do and how best to act. One must be a soldier, I realized, roughly imagining going to this room, judging by the width of the step, and the other is a researcher. 2 people won't be enough to catch me, I decided, still hiding with a bubble amoeba on my shoulder. Caution will never be superfluous, for sure. A soldier in uniform in black and white colors really came into the room with a weapon at the ready. A researcher in a white coat was standing nearby. The brown-haired man passively looked ahead even without any emotion on his apathetic face. What? They exclaimed in one voice as soon as they saw with their own eyes what I had done in the laboratory. Horror and dumbfounded looks appeared on their faces. What's it? They exclaimed haltingly, looking at the muck that was entwining the walls, floor and ceiling, thanks to my efforts. It's like the roots of something. Examining everything, the soldier said, but they blindly did not notice how we were hiding around the corner and watching their reactions. Suddenly, the soldier seemed to sense my presence and immediately turned sharply in our direction, raising his weapon and ready to pull his trigger at any moment. Although his gaze became determined, sweat broke out on his face. I immediately rushed at him, not afraid of anything, as well as his shots with green rays of different lengths in my direction. Quickly catching up with my victim, I immediately saw his look full of even greater shock and wild fear. I didn't waste a drop of time and immediately pierced his stomach through, and scarlet blood immediately gushed from his wound to the floor. He immediately exclaimed at the moment of impact. Go away. The soldier, still alive and barely breathing, croaked haltingly. Tears immediately began to flow from his eyes, and veins full of poison, which I let into his bloodstream, immediately began to swell under his skin. I abruptly pulled my paw out of him, and he immediately fell to the floor, emitting a fountain of blood from his perforated belly, and I just silently watched the once still living person from whom one would expect a threat. But no. Now he is barely breathing and counting the seconds until the final sigh. As soon as the soldier was finished, I immediately moved to my easier prey. "Hey!" the researcher exclaimed and, having fallen, began to crawl away diligently. "Help!" he shouted, fearing that I was heading in his direction step by step. "Save me!" The last thing he cried out was how I immediately grabbed his head with my paw in the face area, as if the device was pulling out a toy for a couple of coins. Painfully. Painfully. Suddenly I heard the voice of a bubble amoeba and immediately looked back in his direction. Seriously? I was puzzled, watching as the bubble diligently waved its small paws. He did not ask for help, but on the contrary was indignant because he saw one of his abusers. It looks like this person also participated in experiments on her. I thought, shifting my gaze to the researcher. He was roaring and ruling. "And you're angry because he hurt you. If you think about it," I thought, and immediately stung my victim, letting a portion of poison into his neck. It can also kill a person. I finally let go of his head, and he looked down at the floor and trembling, began to be covered with protruding veins in which my poison began to spread. She was surprised when, instead of dealing with him as the first one, I took him in my paws and held him out to her abuser's face. But she did not hesitate for a long time and, as if opening like a canvas, the bubble amoeba immediately rushed to the face of her abuser. She held his face tightly in her arms. Whether it began to corrode his face, or whether he began to drown in it as if in a liquid without oxygen, it did not immediately become clear, but one thing was clear: she was punishing her abuser. This is her revenge. Instant death is better, like a soldier's. I reasoned, watching the bubble amoeba still tormenting the twitching body of the researcher, or the death of the researcher from the melting of the head. Well, I thought, deciding to absorb another brain from a test tube, despite the fresh victim, they will die anyway, so there is no point in thinking about it. As soon as I absorbed my next stringy refueling, a system window suddenly appeared in front of me. However, it was sudden. Now I didn't even expect such a turn of events. "Are you happy?" I grinned. I reached my goal earlier than I thought. The blue screen of the system was filled with text to tread characteristic, the first type already exists. Apply the type of strengthening of physical strength? And then the answer options are yes and no. Is luck on my side? I thought, clacking my teeth. I reached my goal faster than I thought. I summed it up, though, without taking my eyes off the blue screen of the system with the text I had been waiting for so long. One type is available to you. The inscriptions of the system window read. Want to unlock the strong body type? And as usual, the answer options are yes and no. I devoured about 500 samples and got only 3 characteristics. I thought mentally, still looking at the translucent window of the system. Although getting a type is not so bad either. Should I unlock a trait now? I thought, touching my elastic pink companion. Wait a minute, I said to him, hissing aloud, I need to do something. A pink lump was surprised, looking at me. I agree, perhaps. After all, I finally decided and pressed the agreement button on the translucent screen. Suddenly, my body seemed to be filled with something hot, spreading through the veins of my body. They appeared under the skin, becoming convex. In the legs, as if the muscles have become much denser and larger. Although outwardly the body did not change much, it only became a little larger than those sizes, and steam began to emanate from me in clouds. My pink friend immediately tensed up watching what was happening and not understanding what was happening. Big. After a while, a pink blob exclaimed and like stars lit up around it. He was very impressed by what was happening, but he was even glad about it. Big. Big. My friend exclaimed and immediately began to jump closer to me. I grew up. Making a hiss out loud, I decided to explain to the experiment, which for some reason puzzled him. Grown up? He asked. What does it mean? When the cub becomes an adult. I hissed back at him again, and he seemed to light up again. A kind of pink flashlight with sparks. A cub? Ah, baby. It finally got to him. The baby has become bigger. He began to exclaim, jumping higher and higher. Baby. The waves of his voice almost screamed. What kid? I did not understand his excessive joy. Well, I thought, mentally reasoning, if we consider this stage from the point of view of immaturity, then there is something in his words. He's pretty smart, I reasoned the same way, not taking my eyes off and watching how the kid was freaking out. I'll explain when he grows up. In any case, I reasoned the same way, putting one of my paws to my head. Now my body is stronger and seems quite hard and heavy. I feel the same as if a leopard suddenly became a rhinoceros. Increased in stature, I reasoned, looking at one of my limbs. The limbs were covered with armor. I turned my gaze to my feet and lightly knocked my right hand on the floor. There was more strength in the legs. What is there with the characteristics? Finally, I thought and again highlighted the blue window of the system in order to find out more. I read natural restoration, tentacles saws, polluting coating. In front of me hung a blue system window with some kind of illumination. A window that only I and no one else could see. The text inside reads: race. Unidentified hostile space creature. Condition. Individual goal. To survive, evolution. Successful, features. Body. Wings, chitin shell, regeneration, combined, venom glands, combined, reinforced exoskeleton, acidic blood, strong legs, the ability to imitate sounds, tentacles saws, polluting coating. Extrasensory perception. Predator's sense, combined, psychic organ. Type. Strong body. Currently only one type is characteristic of you. Type strong psyche, 2 out of 6, natural recovery merged with vitality and formed the combined skill regeneration. I was thinking, studying the system information window. Everything would be fine, but only the penalty for the type leaves much to be desired. I pondered, not taking my eyes off the line at the moment. Only one type is characteristic of you. Type strong psyche, 2 out of 6, amorphous can receive an unlimited number of types, but with the receipt of a new type, the requirements for others will double. For example, if I was the first to get the type strong psyche, then to get the type strong body I would need not 10 characteristics, but 20. If I were in the game, I would think about him first of all. However, the crisis is just around the corner, nothing can be done. I was still thinking, not taking my eyes off. I will postpone getting the next type for later, I decided, and raised my paw in order to test something. A hole appeared in the middle of the so-called palm of my monster body. First you need to test the obtained characteristics. In itself, the tentacles saws are very ambiguous and weak. A red-tinged tentacle immediately popped out of the hole, outwardly resembling my tail in some way, but more ribbed. I made a tentacle release in the direction of the column, entangled in green slime. The tentacle pierced through the target with its sharp point, which immediately spread a web of cracks in different directions. However, after the improvement, they have become much stronger. I decided after analyzing their condition at the moment and carefully studying their appearance. The next in line, polluting coating, I rubbed myself against a surface and immediately dark green smoke began to swirl on the ground as if from a barrel with pesticides. Other abilities can be used together with it. I was thinking, watching how in places where there was smoke, undulating paths were eaten and poison was flowing down my arm in a thick drop of green color. Now I can even form spores that secrete acid. Thanks to this ability, you can turn a ship into a fortress. I thought and immediately looked at my hand, the skin on which had turned a pitch color. It is ideal for fighting a strong enemy. Once I've checked everything, we can move on. I decided, heading away from my nest. I was immediately followed by a pink jumper. "Baby, where to?" he asked, jumping on my shoulder. "To the hangar." I hissed right back at him. I wonder what the reaction of the ship's crew members would be if they saw me in this guise? I thought about it, and when the doors with a whistle gave access further, I went forward with a pink lump on my shoulder. Would they start crying? Or would you run to the escape pods? Now we will find out. Run away. It's coming. There was a shout from the crowd, and many feet immediately trampled on the smooth surface of the cool floor of the ship. "Hurry up!" the brown-haired man exclaimed, opening the doors to the ship's employees and letting them through to the exit. "We won't wait for anyone." He shouted again, and the crowd, without slowing down, was still heading towards him. "All. Close the doors." The brown-haired man exclaimed again, checking whether everyone had time to evacuate from this compartment. "Why are you frozen?" he exclaimed when he saw one of the workers huddling against the wall, trembling violently and barely getting a tooth on a tooth. "Hurry up. We're all going to die." The man stammered, not moving a millimeter and ready for anything. Having thrown away all his hopes. "Damn. Away." The brown-haired man could not stand it and immediately pushed the standing man away with a powerful kick. Without wasting a drop of time, his hand immediately laid on the handle and with powerful jerks, lowered the curved lever down. The doors almost instantly closed with a whoosh in an attempt to block access from that compartment of the ship to living people. There were only a couple of centimeters or even millimeters left, but alas for them, this was enough for me. Through a small gap, the fingers of my limbs immediately appeared, still covered with splashes of someone's blood. I grabbed the door plates with both paws. A small effort and now the plates of the strong door are crumpled and pushed apart. And through the big hole that is formed, I look out, straining every muscle of my alien body. I grinned in a kind of smile, still showing rows of my sharp teeth, but already covered with splashes of fresh scarlet blood. "Ah," the brown-haired man exclaimed and immediately fell on his back, and his body trembled with fear. They are like mice trapped in a trap, or rather in a closed space from which there is no way out. Here it is and the herd for slaughter. Or is the food sent down by God? Stay away. They screamed, stuttering with fear. Save me. Everyone screamed as one, and the women almost broke into a squeak. A cacophony of sounds immediately filled the space. I wonder from which side should I look? I am their punishment or still. I didn't enjoy the screams of horror and tears for too long, and the pleas were replaced by screams even louder, screeching and gurgling. The surfaces of the room were immediately flooded with liters of scarlet still hot blood, which a second ago was still in these bags of meat. They spat blood, the bodies cut in half, managed to warm the hope of escapes, and tried in every way to crawl away. But what's the use? It's all to no avail. This is their end point of the path. This is their undoing. Here and there, bloody palms and stripes remained on the walls and floor from the fact that I was pulling corpses to me, or still breathing victims, so that they would be silenced forever. The glass of the hatch even cracked. Anyway, it was more like a bloodbath with people still begging for salvation. On this day, the ship was still sailing smoothly through space, but alas, not everything was as usual inside. Genocide was taking place inside the ship. A light blue liquid in which a still half-dead ship worker floats. The face is scarred by deep scars from scratches. The eyelid turned blue and swollen. Doctors do not hear. The man thought. What's happening? His blonde hair was sticking out in clumps on his head. There were scars on half of the face, the other half of the face was eaten away by acid. A mask for oxygen access is fixed on the face. Damn, this dream. He cursed inwardly, and his hand twitched slightly, being together with his body in a light recovery fluid. Where have I sinned if I have to suffer like this? Mentally he was indignant. It's better to die than to live like this. His body was emaciated, which made his ribs covered with skin visible, and his stomach sank inside. Subtly, he seemed to feel something and immediately leaned forward a little, although he could not open his eyes, which were injured by the attack of an alien creature. Military boots? He was puzzled, relying on the sounds that he caught. A soldier? But alas for him, it was me. I came and searched his already crippled soul. No. He shouted mentally. This. From the fear that immediately rolled over him like a wave, he immediately opened his injured eyelid, but instead of eyes there was a deep hole. The body of the eye was missing, namely the eyeball with everything attached. He found me. The victim screamed, as if seeing my head being very close to the flask with his body. Peek-a-boo my sweet. I found the keyboard with my eyes and immediately began typing the right password to open this kinder surprise. How long have you been waiting for me? Sorry I'm late. What is he doing? The blonde man was still thinking, without closing his gaping eye socket. And suddenly a pink bouncer landed on the man's face, penetrating into all the open holes on the man's face. Some second after the pink baby wrapped the victim's head in his warm embrace, he immediately began to corrode it and thereby absorb it, bringing incredible pain. My head is burning. The victim screamed mentally, without a chance to say something out loud or call for help. He only felt a terrible burning sensation, as if his head was enveloped in fire or the same acid that had brought injury before. Hey someone. The man was still screaming mentally, and the liquid that enveloped him began to turn scarlet. The color of the victim's spreading blood. And a lot of oxygen bubbles danced right there in the dance. Someone. He shouted inaudibly to others. Please kill me. But I just enjoyed the picture that unfolded in front of me and gave full freedom of action to my young friend and companion. 3 hours later. After finishing the disassembly with the man's body, the pink clod immediately crawled away from the flask with liquid and a bunch of devices. Did you eat well? I hissed the same question to him, catching him when jumping. Yes. Immediately, he said joyfully in response. What kind of revenge is this? I asked again, while in front of us in the flask was no longer a man, but a floating skeleton covered with slightly settled blood. Revenge? The kid was surprised right there. And what is it? Eat the man who bullied you. I explained immediately, shifting my gaze to the victim who was dealt with. Food. Delicious. Only the pink hopalong replied in response. Number 26 doesn't seem to have emotions like revenge. I immediately thought about the answer of my pink hopalong. I don't know, maybe he was born that way, or maybe he hasn't realized what it is yet. I wondered why scientists were so interested in him. He's not capable of turning into a sea demon, is he? The sea demon lives only on ocean planets. It is more than 25 meters long and equipped with tentacles. A huge pink-colored creature, many times larger than human height, with many colorful eyes and not thick tentacles. Users found similarities between him and the amoeba and were treated with suspicion. The developer was too lazy to work out the character, he was written on his knee. However, this is reality, you never know what. I thought, remembering everything I know, at the same time holding the 26th. Baby. I'm full. Said the pink hopalong, bringing me out of my thoughts, and I immediately turned my attention back to him. He looks pretty tired. It flashed through my head as I examined the clot and put it back on my shoulder. After a while, I finally covered the area with my spores, thereby setting up my nest here. The construction of the nest is going according to plan. I thought about it after watching the clot inflate and release a new portion of spores into the air. In this case, I thought, deciding what follows in my plan after that, and smiled predatory. We are going for the next prey. I decided, and my friend and I set off on our way to the next goal of enslaving this ship. The neighborhood of C-08, where the Dbara cartel dominates. Oh, save me. There was a cry on the ship that floats smoothly between the fragments of planets, or more precisely meteorites. Come here. Another exclaimed and grabbed the fleeing man by the arm immediately, preventing him from escaping. To which he only gasped in response. Expensive. Thank you. The victim was a woman in a cream dress with lots of frills. She has pale skin, bright yellow eyes and long raven-colored hair. On one side of her hand was held by a brown-haired man with a scarlet tattoo on his cheek. To her left was an alien in a body whose skin is green. The ears are pointed, and two antennae stick out of the head. He was enjoying what was happening. Get your hands off her right now. A man with light-colored hair and sky-blue eyes exclaimed. He immediately rushed to the aid of his betrothed before it was too late. But alas. He was shot in the back, and his snow-white suit immediately turned scarlet, as if viburnum berries were scattered on freshly fallen snow. No. A woman immediately screamed. The shooter was slightly bald, with only a tuft of blue hair sticking out like an arachis. On the left side of the head there are metal plates and a false eye. On the right side of the face there is the same scarlet tattoo on the skull. Next to him is a man licking the sharpened blade of a dagger. There is a metal implant on the head, shaped like headphones, metal plates from the implant almost to the eye line. He has thickly applied black shadows, and his lips are covered with black lipstick. But he also has a scarlet tattoo, similar to a flower, but applied to the back of his neck. Another one of their gang is squatting next to take off. He hugs a bag of stolen jewelry and smiles contentedly. On his head is a purple mohawk. The implant is on the right side of the face, and the eye is also implanted. The same scarlet pattern flaunts above the metal implants. Take everything they have. The commander exclaimed. One of the pirates has a shock of hair dyed purple. A metal implant is embedded on his chest instead of armor. In his hands he holds a bat with curved nails driven into a tree. The second is a huge insect. Something between a grasshopper and a mantis, with huge scarlet eyes. The third, similar to the other two brothers, also had an eye implant and a mohawk, but bright yellow, like a chicken, in color. Kill the men and rape the women. This is the credo of our Punisher. The same voice exclaimed, and a bunch of pirates immediately surrounded the prisoners. Men and women are gathered in the center of the room, and their hands are firmly fixed relative to the body. Hey. What's with the face? Come here. A dissatisfied voice exclaimed immediately. Someone from the feline family, but with a cross between human and Na, was closely watching what was happening. Or more precisely mutated. Instead of his left eye, he has a metal implant. And between has a land shade. Please have mercy. The victim stuttered and screamed. The commander-in-chief also has an implant on the surface of the head. His mane has a scarlet hue, like blood. And there is a scar line above and below the right eye. Instead of his right arm, he also has a metal implant, and metal plates are worn over his feet for protection. Leo is wearing a red tank top, and sharp spikes stick out of his breast implants. And we worked hard for this little thing? The lion got angry mentally and immediately bared his golden teeth, squinting at the pile of gold and stones from this ship. "Captain!" There was a shout from the side immediately. "How could you?" Lev immediately shifted his gaze to the person who was outraged by something. "We hired you for protection." "But how to understand it?" The voice was indignant again. The lion immediately stopped resting on his paw and nervously sked. "Stupid bastard." The chief among the pirates swore. "Are we friends?" "What?" The blonde man immediately exclaimed, taken aback by what he heard. This is definitely not what was in his plans, and he certainly did not expect such a setup. "And what did you expect?" the lion said and spread his hands to the sides, giving money to strangers. The pigs from Mega Corporation are always like that. There was a guard standing next to the main one. Blonde hair under the square and the same light beard. There is a scarlet mark of fine lines on the left cheek. There are two more pirates in front who are holding the captain of the ship that they are robbing. On the left hand of the victim is a man with a scarlet shock of hair and, like this, a matching outfit, a tattoo of scarlet curls, blooms on the back of the neck. To the right of the kneeling victim is an alien with a blue skin tone, two horns and a scarlet tattoo on his chest. "What did he say?" The captain of the captured ship exclaimed, standing on all fours in front of the king of beasts. "You son of a bitch. The National Guard must have already received a distress signal and is heading here." The blonde man did not let up, still shouting indignantly. "As soon as they appear here, you will be executed immediately." Oh, the lion said in response, not even straining for a second and only clearing his ear. "How scary." "Oh." The blonde man sighed loudly and continued to be indignant all the same. "You're not even worthy of death. It's better to turn you all into mutant Hulk." This was the last boiling point of the main pirate. So much so that the wreaths under the eyes swelled. And the lion immediately stood up. He went to one of his henchmen and took the blade for his own purposes. The metal hand with a screech squeezed the vise on the handle of the cold weapon, and the pawn was covered with perspiration and froze in its place. "Listen, Captain." The pirate captain calmly began to answer. "I guess Mega Corporation doesn't know much about mercenaries." But the captain of the ship that was robbed did not even show any fright, but only clenched his teeth in anger and looked up menacingly. Like a chihuahua on a Labrador or a wolfhound. "So I will kindly explain." The pirate captain continued. His powerful paw immediately grabbed the blonde by the head with a strong grip, like a vice, and pulled him to himself. He only gasped in response. If a mercenary attaches an employer during an agreement, this is a serious crime, but if there are no witnesses, then there is no one to judge. The lion growled, measuring his captured victim with the predator's gaze. "What did you say?" The captain of the stripped ship stammered. "You shouldn't have called the National Guard." The lion growled and snapped his teeth. "For no one can tell them anything," he said, practically moving closer to the blonde. "Are you planning to kill us all?" The captain of the ship exclaimed, quietly understanding the horror of the situation. "I am not familiar with such noble expressions, but I can say one thing for sure." The lion roared. "I just love cutting piglets from Mega Corporation," he spoke and drooled on the blade of the sword in front of the blonde man's face in his powerful grip. A moment and the scarlet splashes splashed like a fountain in a circle, and the victim's body went limp, uttering a heart-rending scream. After they dealt with the captured ship, the boss finally returned to his own ship. "The boss has arrived," one of the pirates exclaimed, and they all bowed to their commander. The difference in height was significant. Yes, and in power. It immediately becomes clear why they do not contradict him and also shake at any approach. "Take everything," said the lion, and immediately threw on the floor the skin of the face removed from the skull of the captain of the robbed ship. "Whatever you want. I do not limit you in actions." "There is," the pirates immediately exclaimed in response, without moving from their seats. "Come to think of it, we've got another job to do today." The boss spoke as he sat down on his throne. He puzzled one of the attendants, from which a man with a bright green mohawk with leather in his hands began to ask questions. What are you talking about?" "Past." The lion snorted and crossed his legs. "Or rather, paw on paw. Bring the garlic here." The captain ordered, and the pirate immediately ran away from his eyes for the desired object. "There is?" "Damn," the lion thought, leaning his head on a metal arm. "I'm surrounded by idiots." "Boss." The messenger who came running exclaimed. "Garlic is here." Thus, he immediately pulled the lion out of his thoughts. "Greetings, boss." A girl with medium-length chestnut-colored hair stammered. She was wearing a white lab coat and large glasses with round lenses. The glasses constantly reflected light, so that the eyes are practically invisible. called? Yes. The lion spoke in his imperious voice, measuring the girl with his gaze. What about the job? Well. She drawled, immediately sweating. There's a meeting to be held today, she mumbled, organized through an acquaintance. But he stopped getting in touch. What? The boss immediately shouted, which scared the girl, and she began to tremble with fear. Ah. She said instinctively and staggered back. Explain. After a little silence, the captain of the ship said more calmly, but the situation was still knee-high. I'm listening. She stammered again and leaned forward a little. A request has been received from Captain Samuel's research vessel. The girl began to explain, still trembling from the shock she had experienced. We need to pick up one corpse. Rod Samuel? The lion immediately bristled, leaning closer to the garlic. What are they doing here? Do you know them? The girl stuttered in surprise, looking up at her boss. Of course. The lion snorted and sighed. Representatives of capital from Titan. He explained and crossed his arms over his chest. What about the corpse? Whose is it? Representatives of noble capital, from the Eugene family. The girl began to explain, and the boss's pupils immediately narrowed, and a squint appeared. The last message said, Chesnachina continued to explain, that 1 million credits would be paid for this case. Ha, the boss sighed and leaned on his paw, 1 million? Madmen? Clearly someone is plotting. The lion immediately thought about it. Something strange is happening inside Megacorporation. Rumor has it that the offspring of the Edgerton family from Mars have challenged the Eugene family, the kings of Earth. Edgerton are officially engaged in the development of ships. 2 large ships made of black metal with light blue illumination are located in the parking lot and have a different shape of the structure. But unofficially genetic modifications. The corpse of a representative of the Eugene family is most likely modified. What if you sell her body to the Edgerton family? I wish I could tear the Edgerton family apart for turning me into a mutant, Leo thought, trying to get up from his throne, but resentment is resentment, and money is money. You say, after breaking a long silence, he finally turned to Garlic, lost contact with the informant. Were they attacked? I'm not sure. Keeping her hands in the lock, the girl mumbled. So, the boss of the space pirates grinned, pigs got lost in our area? I don't know who they are, the lion said, smiling contentedly, but very brave. As soon as we finish here, we will immediately go to Samuel's ship. The boss of the space pirates roared loudly and pointed the metal implants forward. Get ready to track their signal. Yes. His pawns exclaimed and immediately rushed to get down to business. Blow up the ship. The boss of the space pirates growled an order. Erase all traces of our presence. There is. Immediately, a loud response from the team was heard. Soon the ship started its engine, and a bright blue fire immediately appeared from the turbines. The ship flew away, and the one they were on before immediately burst into flames. The pirate ship is made of resin-colored metal with bright blue lights, and a sword covered with a grid of blue lights sticks out of the nose. They set up a lot of bombs to say goodbye to the delayed mechanism in time, in order to have time to escape from the field of view of that robbed ship during this time. Suddenly, the bomb's bulbs lit up brightly, 3 red and 2 green. The time has come. A cloud of bright orange fire enveloped the ship, and a huge explosion of the once flying and crowded vessel sounded. I was puzzled, as if I had a premonition of something. They're here. I decided, and my friend immediately became covered with waves, as if also feeling their presence. I rested my limbs on the exposed areas of the ship's floor and immediately sent a signal to the surface. Connection. A scarlet web of pulse energy immediately began to spread around the perimeter of the ship, filling it completely and giving me a complete picture of what was happening. Like black lightning with a scarlet aura, they hurried through the pipes that permeated the flying spacecraft. The ship was again absorbed by my energy in every area that the pipe system could reach, and it was almost everywhere. It's not bad to have such help, or rather such an ace up your sleeve. They break the side of the ship. I began to mentally study their actions step by step, so as not to lose sight of anything in order to make a docking. I noticed a ship on which it would be difficult to notice scarlet squiggles somewhat similar to a flower. Judging by the graffiti, this is Space Dog. The fire, like a snake, lengthened and immediately chased its tail, forming a circle of fire. A blow, and now from the kick of the pirate in the black mask, the carved circle flew away from his path. Kicking appeared first. A man with pale, more precisely, bluish skin and a black mask with a bat in his hands, followed by a mutant insect with a man's height, a guy who looks like either a clown who escaped from the circus or a rooster with the scarlet mohawk, followed by a man with the same bluish skin and blue hair gathered in a pigtail. Once on the ship, I continued to follow their actions. They would immediately go to the bridge. They may be professionals, I chuckled, but their actions are consistent. But are they smart or stupid? I was puzzled, watching as they again violate the integrity of the ship. Intelligent beings would immediately consider this ship strange. But apparently, they are blinded by greed, as well as tomb robbers who hunt for treasures. While one of them kicked the cut piece of metal with incredible pleasure, the other was already preparing for a clash with those allegedly present on the ship, loading his gun. But how funny their faces twisted when they saw the whole picture of the situation. Although, probably still part of it. I'm not there yet. The whole area that they were in such a hurry to capture is also covered with my spores, which I managed to arrange. And if they didn't care about them before, fools, then in an empty room, except that they have nothing to look at. Boss. The voice of one of the pawns in the lion's speaker rang out. The bridge is captured. But there's some kind of devilry going on here. Which one? The lion was surprised, stopping and drinking wine. There's not a soul on board. Covered with perspiration, a pirate with a bright red prosthesis on his head spoke. There are creepy trees everywhere. Trees? The lion growled angrily, crushing a glass with a pinkish liquid at the same time. Where do plants come from in space? Are you kidding me? It's true, boss. It immediately mumbled in response in the dynamics. Damn bastard. The boss of the space pirates immediately cursed and immediately jumped up from his seat. I'll check it myself. Otherwise, I'll break your heads. 2 improved hearts and mechanical devices with high performance. I began to study it when I saw, with the help of my impulse, the boss of the space pirates, who so confidently led the crowd. I think this mutant Hulk is the boss. Is it worth checking out the others? I thought, changing the angle to the pirates present, among whom is a mutant insect. A human is an insect whose body secretes pheromones. Cyborg Star Union, and the angle immediately changed to a man with a shock of lilac hair and glasses of a specific shape, a metal plate on his chin and chest. Who has an apparatus installed instead of a heart. A very diverse cartel. It seemed to me that I was in a difficult position, because for evolution I need to kill 10 representatives of another race. I thought, still emitting turquoise waves. But the pirates made it easier for me. I was surprised to notice something. My perspective changed to the girl who was following. Brown loose hair, white lab coat like those rats from the lab. And as if a similar shape to them is under the bottom. And who else is this? An ordinary person? As if she had a computer instead of a brain, I decided, taking a closer angle and studying her through and through. Behaves quite normally. You have to be careful with her. I decided, straightening up, which surprised the pink hopalong. Baby, where are you going? He asked, and his thin tentacles seemed to decide to portray a question mark. I'm leaving. I hissed back at him right there. It's dangerous outside, stay here. Better protect this thing. I hissed again and pointed to the only weapon that could harm me on this ship. A medium-sized device with a bunch of cones in a circle inside which something floats in a greenish solution. A piece? Experiment 26 asked again. It is very important. I hissed again and went to meet my guests with open arms. Aha. The pink lump exclaimed and immediately began joyfully jumping up and down on the spot. You can count on me, baby. This is my chance, I decided, not slowing down while the pirates relaxed their vigilance. It is necessary to destroy the energy source of the enemy battleship to block the escape route. They are very greedy, so they will want to protect both the research vessel and their battleship. I was thinking, still moving forward with terrifying speed. Probably, they will be divided into 2 squads. The hunt will begin as soon as the enemy splits up. Exactly the same as they did on this ship some time ago.